Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the first video in my series of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Commander deck techs. I'm releasing a new TMNT Commander deck tech every Thursday through mid-April when Secrets of Strixhaven drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. Hey, it's the Turtles, and we're gonna have fun with it, so if you have a request for a specific TMNT Commander, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Don and Leo, Problem Solvers. This is the leader and the brains of the Turtles, one of our many team-up cards that depicts each turtle with one of their brothers, and it's a lot of fun. At this point, I normally give you some lore behind the depicted characters, but come on, it's Donnie and Leo. We know who we're here to see. I'm excited to show you what I put together for this pair, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card, and why I put it at the head of my deck, so whatever it asks of me, I put about 30 cards toward doing. That's our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I sometimes run more than 2 sweepers just to clear the board. Sometimes I run none at all, but mostly I keep to about 1 or 2 of them. But I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands, so I can make sure I can always hit my land drops, I can cast my spells, and I can play the game. So let's talk about our team up commander. Don and Leo Problem Solvers is a 4/6 legendary mutant ninja turtle, obviously, for 3 and hybrid Azorius mana, which means you can cast this for 3 and double white, 3 and double blue, or 3 a white and a blue. It has vigilance, and at the beginning of our end step, we exile up to 1 target artifact we control and 1 target creature we control, and then return them to the battlefield under their owner's control. So if you're new to Magic, welcome to my videos. I'm going to go over the ideas this deck is built around, both in terms of the mechanics and the way it plays at the table. Then I'll go through each card individually and talk about how it works and why it helps our game plan. So if you have questions, post them in the comments. I'll get to them as soon as I can. So our commander's last ability, this big long one, is a staple effect in blue and white. We call the act of exiling a permanent, then returning it to the battlefield right away, blinking it or flickering it. Some people will tell you there's a difference between the terms, but they're used interchangeably, and I'm going to be using them interchangeably in this video, so don't sweat it. There are some variations to the way the effect plays out, but I will cover them as we see them in this video. But what's the purpose of blinking something? It leaves the battlefield, but then it just comes right back, so why do we care? That question kind of answers itself. The permanent re-enters the battlefield, meaning anything that triggers from it entering triggers again. For example, Elite Guard Mage draws us a card and gains us some life when it enters. So if we blink it, we draw another card and gain more life. On its own, that's pretty sweet, and it's the most basic way we can use a blink effect. Similarly, cards might trigger when one of our things leaves the battlefield too, so we also get those triggers from blinking. Dour Port Mage is a good example of that, since it triggers whenever one or more other creatures we control leave the battlefield without dying, and therefore it draws us a card from that. This is also a good example of the other way we can generate value with Blink, by using cards that care about other cards changing zones. The Guard Mage wants to be blinked, but the Port Mage wants us to blink other permanents like the Guard Mage. By combining both of these effects, we get twice as much out of our blinks. And while drawing cards is great, we have a slew of other ways to be rewarded for blinking our stuff. We can make tokens, interact with our opponent's boards, ramp ourselves, and plenty more. And that's not even the end of the uses for blink. If we can do it at instant speed, which some of our cards let us do, we can block a non-trampling creature and then flicker our blocker, saving them and preventing the attacker from hurting us. Likewise, if an opponent tries to remove one of our creatures with a targeted effect, like Swords to Plowshares or just murder, we can blink our creature to protect it. It then re-enters the battlefield as a new game object, so the removal effect fizzles for lack of a legal target. We can even blink our things to reset them, maybe because they've gotten negative auras attached to them, or negative counters put on them, or even just because we want to untap them. And of course, we've got tricky ways to take advantage of the way the game handles double-sided cards and cards with alternative characteristics, all of which we'll get into with each particular card. So now that we see why blinking is so powerful, we can take a closer look at our commander. Oh, actually this is Conjurer's Closet. But it's actually pretty similar to our commander in that it gives us a free flicker at our end step. But for 5 mana, Donnie and Leo, or Don and Leo I should say, I like to call him Donnie, is much better. This is a solid body with a relevant keyword ability, and much more importantly, it flickers 2 of our things at the end step, an artifact and a creature. It says up to, so we can only do one of them or the other one if we want to, or we could do nothing, but we want to get as much out of this as we can. And since we get both of them, it means we can do twice the tricks and get twice the value every turn's end step. At least our turn's end steps. A lot of the times, blink decks can struggle to win the game. Sure, we're drawing cards and gaining life and maybe making some 1/1 tokens, but we might not have enough threats to make enough of an impact to actually close things out. This deck is not one of those decks, and it's for the simple reason that 2 is more than 1. Add to that the guaranteed repeatable nature of our commander's effect, and the fact that it hits 2 different types of permanents, and our blink strategy goes from being just a value engine to making us a serious presence at the table. So, our deck is built around cards that are great to blink, and ways to take advantage of that blinking. We play around with card types a little, making creatures into artifacts and vice versa, so we can have turns where sometimes we're blinking 2 artifacts or 2 creatures, and getting the most out of our board state at the time. We have a bunch of powerful, expensive pieces that give us a lot when we flicker them, and we have a solid collection of acceleration effects, which not only help us afford our big hits, but can also be flickered themselves to accelerate us even more. In the end, our ability to blink whichever 2 things on our playmat are the most helpful to us at the end of any given turn makes this deck into a kind of a toolbox, able to address whatever our opponents are doing in increasingly flexible ways. Like Leo, we look to the battlefield, assess our opponents, and make our decisions based on our best path to victory. Like Donnie, we understand how our toys work and how we can assemble them into the machine that most completely meets our needs. As with the turtles in our command zone, our deck is strong because it's about 2 things working together, over and over in new combinations that treat our opponents like a puzzle we're meant to figure out. Dealing with their boards and their plays is a fun challenge, and with our tactical mind and technical know-how, we can always find the right combination of cards to come out on top. Our opponents are part of the problem, but Don and Leo are problem solvers, and our deck is full of parts of the solution. You'll enjoy this deck if you like an adaptive approach that means you'll never play the same way twice, or if you like the idea of every game feeling as though you're inventing and reinventing a contraption that assembles advantage and manufactures wins. So, as usual in my videos, we're going to go over this Moxfield list today in detail. At the bottom of this Moxfield list, which is linked in the video's description, you will see a considering section filled with cards that, for my version of the deck, did not make the cut. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have a different idea for what you want to do with this sort of double blink strategy, or if you just don't know where you want to start and you would like to see what the other options are, that considering section's a great place for you to begin when you build your own Don and Leo Problem Solvers deck. So we're going to start with the most relevant part of our deck, our Blinkables. Oh, getting a little excited. There we go. We've got 36 cards that are about us blinking them and getting more value out of them. Normally I go through them in order from an increasing mana value, but I'm going to start with Limbus today, just as a way to start with something simple. So Limbus is from the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth set. It is 2 generic mana for an artifact food that says when it enters, we scry 1 and we draw a card. Pretty good, that's just opt on a food. We can do the food thing, paying 2, tapping and sacking it to gain 3 life rather. Goodness. And when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, including when we sacrifice it, it shuffles itself back into our library. So pretty good for us, very simple as well. It comes in, we scry 1 and draw a card. If we blink this, it will leave and then come back. We scry 1 and we draw a card again. We can blink this because of course we can blink 1 creature and 1 artifact, and this is an artifact, so yeah, we get another bite at the Limbus. We're also running Collector's Cage. Collector's Cage is pretty interesting. 1 and a white for an artifact with Hideaway 5. Hideaway 5 means when it enters, we look at the top 5 cards of our library, exile 1 face down, and put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. That one that's exiled face down, we usually just tuck it under the Collector's Cage to represent that that's what the cage has exiled. Then we can pay a single mana and tap the cage to put a 1/1 counter on one of our creatures. And then, as part of that same ability, it checks to see if we have 3 or more creatures with different powers, and if we do, we can play that exiled card without paying its mana cost. So what we want to do is hide away something powerful, something that's going to be useful to us, that's maybe the most expensive spell that we've looked at, whatever we may find. And then we just pay 1, tap the cage, and put a counter on one of our creatures, which may be our commander. It may be one of the creatures that we're planning to flicker anyway, which is totally fine, because as long as it ends up with us having 3 creatures with different powers, which we call Coven, as after the mechanic that sort of introduced it, then we get a free spell. We don't have to cast that spell the normal way. We can cast it as part of the resolution of this ability without paying its mana cost. So we get something great out of it. But why is this blinkable? Well, the reason is, once we have done this, we've put a counter on something, had Coven, 3 or more creatures with different powers, and played that card that was exiled with the cage, we can blink the cage and it will re-enter, hide away something new, and we can do this all over again. Now, that counter from before still remains on one of those creatures, assuming we didn't, blink that creature away. But we can put a new counter on something and cast something else for free that we hid away underneath it. And we can just keep doing that for the cost of a single generic mana every turn, since we're blinking this as part of our commander's ability. Seems pretty good to me. It is worth noting, though, if you blink the cage, when it still has something hidden away underneath it, that thing that's hidden away is lost forever. It's going to remain in exile permanently, because when the cage re-enters, it's going to be a new game object, which means it will hide away again, and whatever it hides away that time is what it has access to. It doesn't have access to anything it hid away that didn't get cast on a prior instance of the Collector's Cage being in play. So yeah, a little bit of a tricky interaction there, but it can give you pretty sweet, repeatable card advantage over the course of multiple turns. Next is Cryogen Relic. This is 1 and a blue for an artifact that says when it either leaves or enters the battlefield. Enters or leaves the battlefield, we draw a card. So this first comes in, we draw a card. If we flicker this with our commander, it will leave the battlefield and then re-enter it, so we'll draw 2 cards because it will trigger both times. Very, very nice card advantage for us. We can also pay 1 and a blue and sack it to put a stun counter on up to 1 target tapped creature. That creature has to be tapped, but we do have one other way in this deck to make creatures tapped. But I mean, lots of creatures get tapped as just a product of playing the game. Maybe they're getting tapped for mana, maybe they're attacking, whatever it may be. We can stun one of them if we're willing to get rid of our Cryogen Relic. Typically, we want to keep the relic around because it's such a huge source of card advantage for us. We have it flicker at the end step, we draw 2 new cards, we're starting our next turn with hopefully more cards, even if we maybe had to discard down at the end of our turn. But we keep doing that until we have better artifacts than the Cryogen Relic to flicker. And at that point, the relic is likely to be useful to us in this way, more so than this one. So we just use it to stun something and maybe give ourselves a little bit of evasive ability, since an opponent's creature's not going to untap. Maybe we lock it down so they can't do other fun stuff with it. Yeah, pretty neat. Next up is Imposter Mech. Imposter Mech is very interesting in our deck. This is a vehicle, a 1 and a blue artifact vehicle with crew 3. What that means is this is an artifact, and if we can do this at instant speed. If we tap any number of creatures with a total power of at least 3, then until end of turn, Imposter Mech becomes a artifact creature with power 3/1. So that's something that's worth understanding and how vehicles work. But we're really never going to care too much about the Imposter Mech's power and toughness, because we can have it enter as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it's a vehicle artifact with crew 3 and loses all of their card types. Meaning, it comes in, and it still has crew 3, but it has all the text, all the card types, all the text, all the power and toughness, the casting cost, everything else other than its card types of that creature that the opponent controls. So if an opponent has a really powerful commander, or maybe they've played a Galta or a Cityscape Leveler or something along those lines, we want to be able to copy that. Well, we cast the Imposter Mech. It comes in as that creature, except that it's a vehicle, which means it can't attack or block until we crew it, which is totally fine. It just sits there as an artifact, and until it's become an artifact creature by us crewing it, they can't target it with something that can only remove creatures. So we maybe get a big value creature in play without it actually being a creature. It's a vehicle. And what's nice about it is, if someone plays something better, we just flicker the Imposter Mech, and it's able to come in as that new better thing, since it's re-entering, and as it enters, we can have it enter as that copy. So this is pretty great because not only can we do this because our commander is able to flicker up to one artifact every turn, but if we need to flicker a different artifact as well as Imposter Mech, well, we just crew it. We can even tap our commander to do so if we want to. We crew the mech, and now, until end of turn, it's an artifact creature, which means we go to our end step, and our commander can flicker it as the creature it's flickering, rather than the artifact, and we can flicker a different artifact as well. So, pretty nice with our tricksy ways of dealing with card types. So, next up, we have a very simple card, 1 and a white, for an 0/4 wall named Wall of Omens. It's a defender, so it can't attack, and when it enters, we draw a card. Just a simple 2-mana card that blocks pretty well and replaces itself in our hand when it comes in. Just a great way for us to get more and more card advantage. It is able to block, so in that way it's better than Cryogen Relic, but Cryogen Relic, as it gets flickered, draws us more cards, so both are pretty nice in our deck. Next we have Aang Swift Savior. This is 1 a white and a blue for a 2/3 legendary human avatar ally. If you know the avatar set, then you know this card. And if you want to see a commander deck with this guy at the head of it, both one that's intended for new players and one that's intended as a solid like bracket 2 core deck, check out the video that's linked in this video's description, because I built one when we first got the avatar deck out, or the avatar set out. So what does Aang actually do? For 3 mana, we get a 2/3 flash flying creature, so we can play him at instant speed. And when he enters, we airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. That means we exile it, and its owner is able to cast it using regular timing rules for 2 generic mana from exile rather than its mana cost. So because we can do this to a spell, and Aang has flash, we can use this as a sort of it's not really a counter spell, it's more like a reprieve. An opponent tries to cast something to target one of our creatures, we flash in Aang, and we airbend away their spell, and now they could cast that spell again if they've got 2 generic mana, or maybe they have to do it again later. We can also do a creature with this, so this is a nice removal piece or protective piece if we want to look at Aang that way. Very strong ability that leaves behind a 2/3 flyer. Aang also, however, has a Waterbend ability that will transform him. Waterbend means we can pay 8 generic mana, but in lieu of paying any of that mana, we can tap artifacts or creatures we control, or creatures, I should say. So we could pay, 3 mana, tap 3 creatures and tap 2 artifacts, and that still counts as waterbending. We can even tap Aang for this, although we may not want to. So once we waterbend this way, which we again can do at instant speed, we transform Aang and he flips into Aang and La Ocean's Fury, which is a 5/5 Avatar Spirit ally with Reach and Trample. No longer flies, I should mention, but now it's a 5/5 Reach Trample, which is pretty good, and whenever it attacks, we put a 1/1 counter on each tapped creature we control. So typically, if we're attacking with a bunch of our creatures, they're all going to be tapped, except our commander, who has Vigilance, and we're going to be able to put a counter on both Aang and La and all of our other tapped creatures, because it doesn't say on each other tapped creature we control, so it does include itself. So this is pretty sweet, on the front side especially. If we flicker Aang, he will re-enter and airbend something else. We can get rid of the biggest, scariest creature on the battlefield, or some spell if it's on the stack, which is typically not what we're doing when we're flickering this using our commander, since that'll happen at the start of our end step. But we could play it to take care of a spell, go to our end step, let our commander flicker it, and Aang comes back in and we hit a creature with it. So that's a pretty good use for it. But we can also do this. Flip it over with waterbending. It's transformed, we use it, attack with it, and maybe it's not even a good attack. It attacks as a 6/6 trampler, since it'll be tapped to attack and therefore get a counter itself, so it'll be a 6/6 with trample. But maybe that's not a good attack with it. Well, if we've got a way to flicker it at instant speed, we can always flip it back and get rid of whatever would have been in its way, so it's not in its way next time. Or we wait until the end step, because we did have a good attack, and our 6/6 attacker, if we want to flip it back over, we have the option to get rid of another creature. If we don't want to, we can just flicker something else. So Aang and La is very strong, and sometimes even better as Aang Swift Savior, so being able to get both options really opens up the possibilities for what we can do with this. Next, we have Ether Channeler. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/1 human wizard that when it enters, we can choose to either make a 1/1 bird, a white creature token with flying, we can return another non-land permanent to its owner's hand, or we can draw a card. So at the very minimum, we flicker this and we get a bird, or we flicker it and we draw another card. But a lot of the times, we can bounce things with this. We bounce it back to its owner's hand. That can remove something that an opponent spent a lot of time and mana, or a lot of mana, like playing out, and we get it for free during our end step with our commander's ability, flickering our Ether Channeler. We can also use this to bounce one of our own permanents. As long as it's not a land, it can be an artifact, it can be an enchantment, it could be a creature. And we can put that back in our own hand because we might want to play it again to get its value from entering. For example, if we bounce our Wall of Omens, then we get to put that back in our hand, and then we can just replay it, just rebuying its interest trigger. Why would we want to do that? Well, maybe we want to do that because we have other things that we want to flicker with our commander rather than the Wall of Omens, but we sure would like an extra card, so we can get it that way. Flickering the Ether Channeler lets us set ourselves up for that in a lot of different ways. It could also be the case that we think that an opponent is going to board wipe. And if that's the case, we can just play the Ether Channeler, bounce our commander, and then pass to the end of the turn. Or maybe we play the Ether Channeler, draw ourselves a card, pass to the end of turn, our commander triggers, flickering the Ether Channeler. We choose when it comes back in to bounce our commander, and then our opponent has the option to play that board wipe that they were thinking of playing, knowing we can just replay our commander from our hand rather than the command zone, not having to pay the commander tax on our next turn. Pretty good options with all of this, especially since this can hit our own stuff. Next, we have Circuit Mender, another great option for us. 3 generic mana for a 2/3 artifact creature insect, a great bug. When it enters, we gain 2 life, and when it leaves, we draw a card. Because this says leaves the battlefield rather than dies, it will work for us when we flicker it. So it'll come in, we'll gain 2, we can then flicker it with Leo and Dawn, and it will draw us a card and re-enter and gain us 2 life in the same moment. So pretty good. Next up, we have Claim Jumper. This is 2 and a white for a 3/3 Rabbit Mercenary from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. It has Vigilance, much like our commander, and it says when it enters, if an opponent controls more lands than we do, we can search our library for a Plains card and put it on the battlefield tapped. And then, if an opponent still controls more lands than us, we can repeat this process once, and if we search our library at any point, we shuffle. So the idea behind this is, hopefully, we have this in our opening hand and a couple of lands. We wait until turn 3, assuming we're not the opening player, or rather turn 4, assuming we're not the opening player, and we can play the Claim Jumper before we play our land for the turn. If we've got an opponent that already has 4 lands in play, then the Claim Jumper comes in, lets us search for a Plains and put it on the battlefield tapped, and then we can play our land for the turn, so we've ramped ourselves for the next turn. If we're having to play a little catch-up with our opponents because maybe we didn't make all of our land drops, or more importantly, if we're playing against a green opponent who's doing a lot of land-based ramp, well, we can catch right up with them with the Claim Jumper. So being able to do this little bit of catch-up mechanic in a sort of Night of the White Orchid style, put a Plains card right onto the battlefield tapped, and being able to maybe do it twice is pretty sweet for our 3/3 for 3 with Vigilance. What's also notable is that this finds Plains cards. It does not say basic Plains cards. So we have a number of cards in our land base that are Plains, but also islands. And because this doesn't say find a card that's only a Plains or find a basic Plains, we can find a non-basic land as long as it has the Plains type and put it on the battlefield tapped. We have a few tapped dual lands that will do that for us, and the Claim Jumper is the reason for those duels. So yeah, we'll see that soon. What's also great, I should mention, is because we can blink this. So if an opponent happens to get ahead of us after the Claim Jumpers come into play, in terms of how many lands they have in play, which is not likely in this deck because we get a lot of lands in play, but maybe they will. And if they do, Claim Jumper can catch us right back up. Next we have Cryptic Coat, which is a little bit strange in this deck, but go with me. For 2 and a blue, we have an artifact equipment that does not have an equip cost. We can't equip this normally. What it does is when it enters, we cloak the top card of our library and then attach the cryptic coat to it. Cloaking a card means we take the top card of our library and we can look at it, we can put it on the battlefield face down, and it's just a 2/2 creature with Ward 2. So yeah, we take the top card of our library, it goes into play as a creature, it has Ward 2, and the coat is attached to it. Then at any time, and it's worth mentioning, at any time we have priority, we don't have to use the stack for this, we can pay the mana cost of that card, if it's a creature card, and turn it face up. We're not going to do that in this deck, generally. We don't need to, because cloaking it just takes the top card of our library, puts it into play as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2, puts the coat on it, the coat gives it the equipped creature +1/+0 and can't be blocked. So giving us an unblockable 3/2, since +1/+0 on top of the 2/2, for 3 is pretty good. Having a Ward 2 is pretty good as well. And at any point we want to, we can pay 1 and a blue and bounce the cryptic coat back to our hand, which lets us play it again. If we wish to, it'll enter again, we'll cloak the top card, attach this to it, and so forth. So why is this in the deck? The reason is because Ward 2 is a triggered ability that affects spells and abilities that our opponents control that target our face-down 2/2 creature. It doesn't affect our abilities targeting that creature. So if we play the cryptic coat, let's say, and we take the top card of our library and cloak it, it's going to enter face down as a 2/2 creature with Ward 2. Maybe that top card was a land, maybe it was just a basic island. But it's still a 2/2 creature while it's face down and has Ward 2 since it was cloaked. We can go to our end step and flicker that creature with Dawn and Leo because it's a creature. When we flicker it, it will leave the battlefield and re-enter the battlefield. Cards enter the battlefield by default face up, which means we flicker this face down 2/2 creature, it will come back in and will no longer be a creature, it'll be a land. So we've used Cryptic Coat as a way to give ourselves a creature for a moment, and if we want to keep it as a creature, we just don't flicker it. It'll just be a 3/2 with Ward 2 that can't be blocked. We can swing in with that. And once we're ready to, we flicker it at the end step with our commander, and it comes in as an untapped land for us. Maybe we play this, and we cloak the top card of our library, and it's a very expensive creature that has a cool enters trigger. Well, we just flicker that creature, and it will come back as itself, face up, as a big creature, and we get to do it again. This is a great way for us to cheat cards into play. It's not really cheating, it's just we're calling it cheating because we're getting creatures or lands or other permanents into play that we aren't going to be using, that we aren't going to be paying for, really. So the only time we really want to leave a cloaked card face down is if that cloaked card is a non-permanent spell. Like if we get Swords to Plowshares, that's an instant. So flickering an instant, or flickering a face down card that's an instant, is going to just send it to exile, and it can't re-enter the battlefield because instants don't go to the battlefield, so it would just stay in exile. So that's too bad. But what's great about Cryptic Coat is it lets us play it, cloaks the top card of our library, we go to our end step, and Dawn and Leo flickers the coat itself and the creature that it's cloaked. You know, it's a creature, at least for now. Both of them will re-enter the battlefield, and whatever the creature was on the other side, its front side, is how it enters the battlefield. We get whatever we want, or whatever value would come with it, or if it's just a land or something, we get that land, that's fine. And then the Cryptic Coat enters, and it triggers again, and we cloak the top card of our library again, we can do it again the next turn. And until the next turn, we've got a 3/2 that can't be blocked with Ward 2. Pretty fun as a nice way to do this. Now I will mention, this is the only card of the deck that cloaks our cards. We do have a few other cards that bring a card into play face down, manifested. Manifest is exactly the same mechanic as Cloak, except the 2/2 creature does not have Ward 2. But it will work the same way for the tricks that we're pulling with it. So it's just worth noting that this Cryptic Coat, anything that it brings in has Ward 2, any of our other face down cards do not. So yeah, Cryptic Coat, lots to say about it, because it does cool things in this deck. Next up, we have Halia, Guided by Light. 2 and a white for a 3/3 legendary human soldier that says whenever she or another creature or artifact we control enters, we gain a life. So she's doing an awful lot for us, gaining us life with our mini artifacts or our mini creatures, or of course herself. And it says at the beginning of our end step, draw a card if we've gained 3 or more life this turn. So this trigger goes on the stack at the start of our end step if we've gained 3 or more life this turn. It does not go on the stack and then only draw us a card if by the time it's resolved, we've gained 3 or more life. I'll explain. If we've got our commander in play and then we play Halia, she comes in and we gain a life. We go to our end step, we can't then flicker a creature and an artifact, have them re-enter, gain life with Halia, and then let Halia's ability resolve and we draw a card. That's not how it works. This ability has an if in it. It's not really an intervening if, but it works the same way as one. So this ability will not go on the stack at all unless we've gained 3 or more life this turn. So at the start of our end step, that's the only chance for this to trigger. So we have to have gained 3 or more life this turn prior to the end step in order for this to go on the stack. That being said, anything that we flicker during our end step that's a creature or an artifact will trigger Halia and gain us life. It just won't necessarily contribute toward this ability for us to draw a card. Make sense? Good. Halia also has Warp for a single white mana, which means instead of casting her for 2 and a white, we can cast her for just a single white, and if we do, at the end step, we exile her, and we can, on a later turn, cast her from exile for 2 and a white. The reason we might want to do that is because maybe we can play another artifact and or creature, or 2 more artifacts and or creatures, in addition to Halia, if we just play her for her warp cost. If that's the case, Halia comes in, gains us a life, we get another creature and or artifact to come in during that turn, and so now we've gained 3 or more life. And then this trigger, since we've gained 3 or more life during the turn, will go on the stack at the end step, as will the delayed trigger for warp. And we can put those on the stack in any order we want. So what we do is we have this resolve first, and this resolve second. The reason we want to do it that way, because since they'll go on the stack at the same time, we'll get the card no matter what. But we want to make sure that Halia gets exiled as far from the beginning of our end step as possible, because Dawn and Leo are also going to trigger. So we want to make sure that we can do some more flickering and not have Halia get exiled before that flickering is done, because she'll also gain us some more life. It doesn't matter, I guess I should say, it doesn't matter where we put this trigger on the stack. It just matters that her leaving the battlefield sort of happens last of all the things we have happen during our end step, since we want to be able to take advantage of her still being around, so we can gain more life as we flicker our other stuff. So yeah, a little bit complicated with the way that our flickering works, but play it a couple of times and it'll make sense. Next we have Lauren of the Third Path. 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer. She has vigilance, and when she enters, we destroy a target artifact or enchantment. That is disenchant. So she's a disenchant on a stick. She comes in, blows up an artifact or enchantment. We get to get rid of something that's annoying on an opponent's board. Pretty good. In addition, when she no longer has summoning sickness, we can tap her, and we and a target opponent we choose each draw a card. So this is a great way to be political at the table, to say, hey, I want to draw a card. I don't have to choose you, but I'd like to choose you. What will you give me if I choose you as my opponent who's going to draw the card? And someone might say, I'm not going to give you anything. Choose me or don't draw a card yourself. And we'll say that's fair. But someone else might say, oh, but no, we can be friends. We can have a non-aggression pact, or I'll leave you alone for a turn cycle. Maybe we even propose that to the opponents, like, hey, I'll give you a card if you leave me alone for the next turn. And they'll be like, sucker, we weren't going to bother them anyway. Which gives us a card, gives them a card, gives us both ahead. Pretty good. And of course we can flicker Lauren to get our disenchant again. I should be talking about the flickering for this, and I have been for all of them, but I didn't for Halia. Warp for a single white means we have a delayed trigger, like I mentioned, at our end step, which will exile Halia and give us the ability to cast her again on another turn. The reason this is good in this deck is this is another one of our cheats. We play Halia by casting her for her warp cost. We go to our end step. Dawn and Leo triggers, and so does this delayed trigger. We make sure Dawn and Leo's trigger resolves first, and we flicker Halia. Halia will leave the battlefield and re-enter the battlefield, see herself re-enter, gain us a life, and then this delayed trigger will resolve and will not be able to find her, because the Halia that was warped in was a previous game object. That object has left the battlefield and the card re-entered, but the previous object that was warped in is no longer there. A new Halia is here. So by warping her in and choosing to flicker her at the end step before her delayed trigger resolves, it means that we don't have to pay 2 and a white on a later turn or even during that turn. We just pay it the once, flicker her, and she's back in, and having gained us 2 life over the course of that turn. So yeah, pretty sweet for us as a way to take advantage of our commander's ability. We have a few more warp cards in this deck that we'll talk more about again soon. Actually, right now, All Fate Stalker is next. This is 3 and a white for a 2/3 Drix Assassin that when it enters, we exile up to 1 target non-assassin creature until this leaves the battlefield. So we can play this for 3 and a white. It comes in, we exile a creature that an opponent controls, and it's just exiled for as long as the All Fate Stalker's on the battlefield. That's okay. We could also hit one of our own creatures, because it doesn't say 1 target non-assassin creature an opponent controls. So we might tuck one of our own creatures under this. Why might we want to do that? Well, because it has warp for 1 and a white. We could play this for 1 and a white. It enters, it exiles something, we exile one of our own creatures. Then, at the end step, the warp delayed trigger goes off. The All Fate Stalker goes to exile, and we can then play it on a later turn for 3 and a white. And the creature that it exiled re-enters the battlefield, which means it's sort of like a slow flicker. Slow flicker is what it's called when you exile a creature and it returns at the beginning of the next end step. This is not exactly that, but it does a good imitation of it. So this is a good way for us to get more value out of our creatures that we have many of that give us value when they enter. But we can also do that and the removal version of this using our commander. The same way I just described for Halia. We play this for its warp cost, 1 and a white. It comes in, we exile one of our own non-assassin creatures. Something that has a good enters or leaves trigger, or both. Then we go to the end step, and the delayed trigger for warp will go on the stack, but it goes on the stack at the same time as our commander's end step trigger, so we can order them in whatever order we want. We have our commander's trigger resolve first. When it resolves, we flicker the Stalker. The Stalker will leave the battlefield and then re-enter, which of course takes the creature that it had exiled of ours, has it re-enter as well. We get its enters trigger and any leaves triggers that might be there as well. A lot of value from that. The All Fate Stalker then has entered again, and we get to exile something else. Now we exile, it could be one of our things, that's true, but it can also be something of an opponent's that we're planning to just get rid of, for as long as this is in play. And then that thing is gone. After all of that has happened, the delayed trigger gets to resolve, but the All Fate Stalker that we warped in is no longer on the battlefield. The same card is, but it's a different game object since it's been flickered in the meantime. So that means this doesn't get exiled. We just only paid 1 and a white for it, got to slow flicker one of our own things, had it come back in, and got to exile something of our opponent's for at least while this is in play. So pretty sweet. In addition, maybe the thing that we exile from our opponent's battlefield or our opponent's boards is not as scary as something they play later. Well, then we just flicker the All Fate Stalker, let that other thing re-enter the battlefield, the one that we had already exiled with it, and the new thing that's more dangerous, we exile under the Stalker. No problem. Very nice. Next, we've already seen Elite Guard Mage, but we're going to talk about it. 2 a white and a blue for a 2/3 human wizard with flying. When it enters, we draw a card and gain 3 life. That is Revitalize. That's a 2-mana spell on its own. So a 2-mana spell stapled to a 2/3 flyer for just 2 more mana is pretty great. And as we've already spoken about, flickering this gains us another 3 life and draws us another card. Seems good. Phyrexian Metamorph is next. This is another card that does some really cool stuff with us. So this is a 3 and a Phyrexian blue artifact creature Phyrexian shapeshifter that is a 0/0. I know you're thinking, doesn't that mean it dies right away? We'll get to that. Let's talk about Phyrexian mana. The way this works is you can either cast a spell for 3 generic mana and a blue mana, or 3 generic mana and 2 life. That's the reminder text right here. It's how Phyrexian blue mana works. So it's either blue or it's 2 life, which means for 2 life, you can play this a turn earlier. Or for less, if you want to think of it that way, either one. What's great about it is, We can have this enter as a copy of any artifact or creature on the battlefield, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So much like when we saw with the Imposter mech, this can become in as any artifact or creature. It doesn't have to be something an opponent controls. And it's not a vehicle when it does. So this comes in, the only thing that changes about it is that it's also an artifact. So this comes in, maybe we copy an artifact with it. Maybe an opponent has a Panharmonicon. That would be amazing for us. And we get our own Panharmonicon. Very nice. Maybe we use it to copy an opponent's creature, like Galta. Then we've paid 3 or 4 mana for a 12/12. That's also an artifact. And then we go to our end step, and we flicker Phyrexian Metamorph. And because it is an artifact creature, when it comes in, if it comes in as an artifact, we can flicker it as an artifact. If it came in as a creature, it's also an artifact, so we can still flicker it as our artifact for the flicker that our commander gives us, or as the creature that our commander gives us a flicker for. We can do either one if it happens to be an artifact creature. Obviously, if this comes in as a copy of just an artifact that is not a creature, it will itself not be a creature. It will just be an artifact. But that means, like we've said before, we can reset this. We can have it leave and come back in as something different. If this copies something that has an enters trigger, for example, like maybe our elite guild mage is already in play, we play the Phyrexian Metamorph, it enters as the guard mage I should say, and because the guard mage enters and gains us 3 life and draws us a card, so will the Metamorph. So we can use this to get whatever other enters or leaves triggers we might want, because it will be that thing once it enters the battlefield. And then we reset it, make it into something else that an opponent has, something else of ours that we like. The fact that it remains an artifact lets us play with the type, and maybe flicker this as our artifact for the turn and flicker a different creature as well. Very flexible for us, very nice. Next up is Saravek's Tome. 4 generic mana for an artifact that says when it enters, we take the initiative. I know you're wondering, what is the initiative? Well, the initiative is a little bit complicated. Let's talk about it. We have it right here. The initiative is a status that a player has. You can have this card, which is not hard to get, to represent it. And it basically just means this. Whenever you take the initiative, or a creature deals combat damage to someone with the initiative, that creature's controller takes the initiative. So you can take it whenever you play a creature that says, or play a card that says, take the initiative. Or if someone else has the initiative and they do combat damage to you, they will take the initiative. Every time you take the initiative, or at the start of your upkeep, if you already have the initiative, you venture into the Undercity. That is this dungeon. So the dungeon is, you put a little marker on this little map, and you go into the secret entrance. Every time you would then venture into the Undercity, which is to say, if you take the initiative from someone, or if you have the initiative at the start of your upkeep, you'll continue to venture in. When you do, you choose which path you take. Maybe you go from the secret entrance to the Lost Well, and then from the Lost Well, you can choose to go to the arena or the stash, but you can't go to the trap because that's not where the room leads. So you'll be going through the Undercity until you get to the last room, Throne of the Dead 3, at which point you have completed the dungeon. If you then venture into the Undercity again, you start back at the entrance, and you just keep going. So this is just a way to get repeatable value, either by having the initiative at the start of your upkeep, or by taking it from an opponent, or maybe taking it back from an opponent if they took it back from you. But you don't have to restart every time you take the initiative from someone else. You stay in the dungeon, your little marker does. And if maybe you've made it to the arena, someone takes the initiative from you, when you take it back, you will then go to the archives or the catacombs. You just keep going. So lots of value. Seems like a complicated mechanic, and it is a little bit, but it's still a fun one. So yeah, that is how the initiative works. So we're gonna go back to Saravek's Tome and talk about how it works. So for 4 generic mana, as I mentioned, it's an artifact that when it enters, we take the initiative. Meaning every time we flicker this, we're gonna take the initiative. We don't have to attack an opponent that has the initiative to take it back. We just flicker our tome at our end step with our commander, meaning we'll take the initiative back. Done. It's that simple. This tome taps for a single colorless mana, but if we have the initiative, which we sure will the turn that we play it, it taps for 2 colorless mana instead. So nice ramp for us. And we can pay 3 generic mana and tap it to exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land card, and then we can cast that card without paying its mana cost. So a free spell for us. It's 3 generic mana and tapping the tome, so not really free, but we might be getting something quite powerful that costs a lot more than 3. We can only activate this ability, however, if we've completed a dungeon. So Saravek's Tome is more challenging in a normal game, because we have to keep the initiative or keep retaking it. But in our deck, all we have to do is flicker this a couple of times, 4 times at most, and then we've completed a dungeon. Because that is going to take the initiative each time. So we can use this as a little bit of an expensive mana rock, but maybe a powerful one while we have the initiative. And until then, we just keep flickering it, getting more value every time because we get value out of going through the dungeon. And eventually, this turns into us casting spells without paying their mana cost off from not really the top of our library, but just the top spell in our library. So a lot of fun with this as a way to keep the game going. Next up, Solemn Simulacrum. Love this card. Great card for this deck. 4 generic mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem that says when it enters, we Rampant Growth, which means to search our library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So the sad robot comes in, we find a basic plains or a basic island in our deck, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Great. A little bit of ramp for us, much the way that Saravek's Tome is 4 generic mana for something they could tap for mana. But the sad robot goes and finds us a land, so it's tapping for colored mana, even though it does come in tapped. And then, when the sad robot dies, we can draw a card. That's fine. We can get a little bit of draw from that. I don't mind doing that. But we don't want it to die. We want to flicker it. And since it's an artifact creature, we can flicker it as an artifact or as a creature, whichever one of those 2 that our commander wants to use the slot for when we flicker at the end step. All flickering for this does for us is Rampant Growth us over and over and over every time we flicker it. So that's a lot of powerful ways to get more land into play so we can play more of our spells and get ahead of our opponents to be able to get more of our big things out so we can flicker those too. Solemn Simulacrum is a great card for us to copy with something like Phyrexian Metamorph or with Imposter Mech. So if we had our Solemn Simulacrum in play already and we play our Phyrexian Metamorph, it will come in, see itself come in, Rampant Growth us. We go to end step and we flicker them both. Since they're entering at the same time, we can't have the Phyrexian Metamorph come in as a copy of the sad robot because the robot is not in play at that moment either. They're both entering at the same time. So we just have this come in as a copy of something else, have the sad robot enter, we get its enters trigger, we still get to Rampant Growth. I guess the one thing I should mention about the Metamorph is that we don't want to have it copy a legendary creature. Because if it does, or a legendary creature that we control, because having 2 legendary creatures means we have to legend rule one of them away, which means 2 creatures that have the legendary subtype that have the same name, or 2 permanents, I should say, we're only allowed to have 1 at a time. So the moment state-based actions are checked, basically immediately, we have to take 1 and put it in our graveyard. So we wouldn't want to copy our commander with this. It won't give us extra flickers at our end step because it won't stick around because our commander's legendary. So yeah. But Sad Robot, very powerful for us. Rampant Growth on a stick, over and over, with our commander especially. Yeah, we love it. Next we have Thousand Moons Smithy. 2 and double white for a legendary artifact that says when it enters, we make a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with power and toughness, each equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures we control. So if we have 4 artifacts and 3 creatures in play, it makes a 7/7 creature that just keeps getting bigger the more artifacts and creatures we have in play, and it is an artifact creature, so it counts itself. So it's always going to be at least a 1/1. So on its face, this is already very powerful. I would like to call out, this is a legendary artifact. So again, we don't want to copy this with the Phyrexian Metamorph unless we're willing to let one of them go to the graveyard. But it comes in, makes us a big creature, and so it's going to be a 2/2 the moment it comes in, since it's counting itself and the Thousand Moon Smithy. Then we have a trigger. At the beginning of our first main phase, we may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures we control, including the Smithy itself. And if we do, we transform it into the Barracks of the Thousand, which is a legendary artifact land. it taps for colorless, or for white mana, and it says whenever we cast an artifact or creature spell using mana produced by it, we make one of those gnomes. Token power toughness equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures we control. So a very strong effect that lets us pay 4, get a big creature, tap some things down during one of our turns, but when we do, it's going to become a land, and if we didn't tap it as part of that 5 things, it'll be untapped. So we can tap it for mana right away, and if we cast an artifact or creature spell with that mana, we get another one of these tokens. So 2 things that are cool about the Thousand Moon Smithy. The first is, it enters and makes us a huge creature, which is an artifact creature. It's a token creature though, so we don't want to flicker that artifact creature, which is fine because we'll just flicker the Thousand Moon Smithy. It will enter and make us another big creature, making both of those creatures bigger than the first one because we've now added another creature, and artifact of course, to the battlefield. In addition, when it flips into a land, it's a land, but it is an artifact land, which means it has the artifact type, and so we can flicker this as well. If we wanted to, we can do the thing that causes us to flip this over. Hopefully it's untapped. We use its mana to cast an artifact or creature spell. We make another gnome soldier, and then we go to our end step and use our commander to flicker an artifact. We flicker Barracks of the Thousand. It re-enters as its front face, because cards always enter the battlefield front face up unless it otherwise specifies. Thousand Moon Smithy will come back in, make us yet another token, and now we've got a bunch of gnome soldiers running around. We'll get this trigger at the start of our first main phase on our next turn, and maybe we flip it over again. Use its mana to make another one of these things, flicker it with our commander since it's an artifact, get another token. Just keep going over and over with this. Or maybe we're fine with just getting one of these tokens to start with, flipping it over, and having another land. Maybe we just need a little mana acceleration. And with that, we're still making these tokens. So lots of fun can be had with Barracks of the Thousand. Next we have Whirler Rogue. 2 and double blue for a 2/2 human rogue artificer that says when it enters, we make 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. Little guys. So yeah, we get 4 mana, which gives us a 2/2 and a pair of 1/1 flyers. That's pretty good on its own. If we flicker the rogue, we get 2 more Thopters. Seems good. And if we tap 2 untapped artifacts we control, we can make target creature unblockable this turn. This is really strong for us. It gives us the ability to get in with our commander or one of our big creatures without having to worry about blocks and just do our damage. And it's nice because the Whirler Rogue comes with 2 artifacts that we could tap down in order to make a creature unblockable. But I want to call out a more tricky way to use the Whirler Rogue. It says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, but it doesn't say target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So one thing we can do with this is say to an opponent, hey, opponent A, I know you want to attack opponent B, but they've got all these blockers. I can use my Whirler Rogue to make your creature or your commander unblockable. How do you feel about that? Will you leave me alone for a turn cycle or 2 in exchange? And they might say, yeah, that's a good deal. Go ahead and activate it. To which we would say, no, 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 no. You have to attack first, because if I make your thing unblockable, you could then move to attacks and attack me, and I wouldn't be able to block it either. And they would say, okay, that's fair, that's a good deal, I will go ahead and declare attacks. And we'll say, oh, we're honorable. Before blocks are declared, we will activate our Whirler Rogue, tap 2 of our untapped artifacts, and make your attacker unblockable. That's pretty good. But what's even better is when an opponent attacks a different opponent, and we decide to make their creature unblockable without asking them. We don't need their permission to make their creature unblockable. We might look at opponent B and say, they're more of a threat to us than opponent A. Opponent A is still attacking opponent B, so we're going to make opponent A's creature unblockable without even talking to opponent A, just because we want to see that damage get done. We're able to do that. And what's nice is, Whirler Rogue says tap 2 untapped artifacts we control. It makes Thopters, but we don't have to tap Thopters for it, and we're running 29 artifacts in our deck. So we could tap multiple pairs of things and make multiple things unblockable. Maybe ours, maybe our opponent's, we don't know. Lots of different things that we can do with this, and every time we flicker the rogue, we get 2 more of those tokens to be able to do this with. In addition, we're tapping the tokens, not the rogue. So we can do this the same turn the rogue comes in while it has Summoning Sickness. Next we have Aerial Extortionist, really fun card from the Streets of New Capenna Commander product. 3 and double white for a 4/3 bird soldier with flying that says whenever it enters or deals combat damage to a player, we exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it. So this is sort of like airbending, but rather than that opponent being able to cast that card for just 2 generic mana, they have to pay its casting cost. They're still allowed to cast it. They may cast it for as long as it's exiled, but they don't get any particular discount on that. So this comes in, Aerial Extortionist, and just exiles something. It's just gone until they want to recast it. And if they want to recast it, they have to do so following its normal timing rules. So if we exile a creature, they can't recast that creature until their turn unless it has flash, or they have some other way to cast spells at flash speed. So the Extortionist gets rid of something the first time it comes in, and if we flicker it, it's going to get rid of something else. Or we just keep it in play, and it just does combat damage to a player, and it'll do this all over again. And it's a 4/3 flyer, so nothing to sneeze at. In addition, whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. So if we have an opponent cast a spell from their graveyard with flashback, we'll draw a card. If they cast a spell from exile using some kind of impulse draw effect, we draw a card. If they cast their commander from the command zone, we draw a card. If they cast one of these creatures, or one of these non-land permanents that we have exiled, they have permission to do so, but every time they do, it's going to be from somewhere other than their hand, so we're going to draw a card. So the Extortionist is a lot of card advantage for us, especially in a commander game where most of the time people are casting spells from their hands, but not like the vast majority of the time. There's lots of other ways to cast spells, in addition to being something that we can use to remove things that we don't want to see, or just take some of our own things, put them in exile to either protect them from maybe a coming board wipe, to be able to rebuy their interest triggers if we want to do that. This Extortionist does a lot for us in this deck. Next up, we have Cloud Blazer. Love Cloud Blazer in a Flicker deck. 3 a white and a blue for a 2/2 flying human scout. When it enters, we gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. So the Blazer costs 1 more mana than our Guard Mage, and doesn't gain us 3 life, it only gains us 2. And it's only a 2/2 instead of a 2/3. But it does draw us 2 cards, and that's totally worth the extra mana and the difference in power and toughness and life gain. So yeah, we want to have both, so we're running both. Love the Cloud Blazer. Glad they reprinted it in Foundations. Next is Dissection Tools. This is from Duskmourn. 5 generic mana for an artifact equipment that, in order to equip it, we have to sacrifice a creature. Luckily, we have some token generation in this deck, like our Whirler Rogue makes Thopter tokens. Those are creatures. But that's how we would equip this Dissection Tools. Except, when it enters, we Manifest Dread and then attach this equipment to that creature. Manifest Dread is a mechanic that means look at the top 2 cards of your library, put 1 into your graveyard, and the other face down onto the battlefield as a 2/2 creature. It's not cloaked, so it doesn't have Ward 2, it's just a 2/2 creature. But we got to look at 2 cards and choose which one we want to put on the battlefield of the 2. The other one will go in our graveyard. That's what Manifest Dread does. So Dissection Tools makes us a 2/2 that is a face down card of one of the top 2 cards in our library. That's pretty good for card selection, because especially since we know that we're able to flicker that face down card using our commander since it's a creature. So maybe we see 2 lands, well, we put 1 land in the graveyard and 1 land face down into play as a 2/2 and attach the Dissection Tools to it. And then we've got that 2/2 that we can flicker, and it will become a land when it re-enters. That seems good. Dissection Tools gives the equipped creature +2/+2, Death Touch, and Lifelink. So we're actually paying 5 mana and getting a 4/4 Death Touch Lifelink, putting a card in our graveyard, and the one we didn't put in the graveyard is the face down card that we might want to flicker and get something else out of. So we can use this in a similar way to the coat that we saw earlier, our Cryptic Coat, by having our commander at our end step flicker the Dissection Tools as our artifact and the 2/2 creature that's face down as our creature. Then we get whatever that card was as a creature to re-enter the battlefield, or to enter the battlefield face up, and the dissection tools will enter and will manifest dread and attach it to whichever creature we choose again, or to the creature that manifest dread produces. But also, we get this dissection tools into play. It manifests dread, attaches itself to that creature. We can sacrifice that creature. Maybe we saw 2 lands on top of our library. Well, we manifest one onto the battlefield. Then, at sorcery speed, because equip is only at sorcery speed, we sacrifice that creature. It will go to the graveyard, face up as a land, but we've done so to equip this to something else. Maybe we equip it to our commander. Our commander doesn't have summoning sickness in this scenario, let's say. So our commander is now a 6/8 Death Touch Lifelink Vigilance. We swing in with that, gain a bunch of life, go to our end step, flicker the dissection tools. Now it will re-enter, manifest dread, attach itself to that new creature that we got from manifest dread, and let's assume we flickered a creature as well. Sure, seems good. We could do this all over again next turn if we want to. So dissection tools gives us an awful lot, and manifest dread is very powerful for our selection and our ability to get something really good into play that we can flicker and then turn face up. Next we have Geist Honored Monk. This is 3 and double white for a star human monk with vigilance. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures we control. Not creatures and artifacts, like those gnome soldiers that the Thousand Moon Smithy makes. Just the number of creatures we control. However, when it enters, we make 2 1/1 white spirit creatures tokens with flying. Great. So we play this for 5. We get itself and 2 spirits. If it's the only creature we have, it's a 3/3 that comes with 2 1/1s that fly. And this has vigilance, so a 3/3 with vigilance and 2 1/1 flyers for 5 is a pretty good rate. We flicker this, we get 2 more spirits when it re-enters, and it gets a little bigger. We copy this with something like our Phyrexian Metamorph, and it comes in and makes more of our little spirit tokens. So lots and lots of ways to get more stuff out of this and to make it bigger and bigger. Pretty good. Next is Illithid Harvester. This card looks complicated because it's an adventure card. I'll explain. This is, ignore this part right here for now. Just this text box is what matters. So this is a 4 and a blue, 4/4 horror creature with Ceramorphosis as an ability, which means when it enters, we turn any number of target tapped non-token creatures face down, and they are 2/2 horrors. So this comes in, and if our opponents have a bunch of tapped creatures, we take every one of those creatures, turn them face down. Those creatures are 2/2 horrors. That's all they are. They don't have a color. They don't have anything other than a creature type, and the type creature. They have a power and toughness of 2. They've got no other abilities, no other types. That includes their commanders. And it doesn't say until your next end step or until your next turn, whatever it may be. If an opponent has attacked another opponent with a bunch of creatures that are now tapped, we play our Harvester, and those creatures are now essentially transformed into 2/2s forever. So if an opponent has their commander out, that commander, if it was tapped, is now a 2/2 horror, and it's going to remain that way until they can sacrifice it, have it die some other way, maybe bounce it, maybe flicker it themselves, whatever it may be. Which means this is a way for us to take our creatures that are tapped and non-token and turn them face down and make them into 2/2 horrors if we want to. I don't know why we would want to do that, but maybe we could. It's totally fine if we do, and it seems fun to be able to hit our opponents with this. Especially if we flicker the Illithid Harvester and do this on another turn when someone thinks that they're safe from us since the Ceramorphosis has already happened. So they attack again, we flicker the Harvester on our turn, all of their stuff that's tapped and non-token that wasn't face down is now, if we want it to be. So yeah, the Harvester is very strong. But not just that. It has a sorcery called Plant Tadpoles, which is an adventure. Adventures work like this. While this card is in our hand, we can play the Illithid Harvester, and it gets its regular ability, and it's a 4/4. If that's the case, we ignore the adventure. But while it's in our hand, instead of playing it as a creature, we can play it as this sorcery, Plant Tadpoles. If we do, once this is resolved, we then exile this card and we can play the Illicit Harvester for its casting cost from exile. In a way, it's kind of like Warp, but instead of Warp giving us a creature that goes away and we can play the creature on a later turn from exile, the way Adventure works is we cast the Adventure, Illithid Harvester goes into exile, and we can then cast it. It doesn't even have to be on a later turn if we've got the mana. So we get a sorcery and then a creature, rather than a creature and then the same creature with Warp. However, it is worth noting, we can either play this from our hand as the creature, or we can play it as the Adventure and then the creature from exile. We can never play the Adventure once the creature's already in play. But what does Plant Tadpoles do? This is X and double blue for a sorcery adventure. We get to decide what X is. We can pump as much mana into it as we want, including 0 if we really want to. Don't think we should, but we could. That lets us tap that many target creatures, and they don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. So maybe, on our turn, as a sorcery, we cast Plant Tadpoles X equals 4, which means we pay 4 in double blue for a total of 6 mana, and we tap down 4 creatures on our opponent's boards. Those creatures will tap and won't untap during their controller's next untap steps. We pass the turn, those creatures don't untap, we get back to our turn, and we cast the Illithid Harvester. Well, what do you know? All those creatures are tapped, so when the Harvester enters, we can turn those tapped non-token creatures face down, and now they're 2/2 horrors, and that's all they are. So, good trickery, Plant Tadpoles, we get to do a Ceramorphosis, we get to do fun stuff here. So yeah, this is very strong on its own, especially since we can flicker it. Plant Tadpoles only makes it stronger. Next up is Knight Paladin from the Warhammer 40k Commander product. 5 generic mana for a 6/6 vehicle that crews for only 1. We only have to tap 1 creature, power 1 or greater, to make this into an artifact creature until end of turn. It has trample, so it's a 6/6 trample for 5, and when it enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. Just straight up 4 damage, just Flame Slash every opponent. Flame Slash, is that 4 damage? Probably. In any case, this is doing 12 damage when it enters, assuming we have 3 opponents. Which means if we flicker it, it's doing another 12 damage. And since it is a vehicle, just like with the Imposter mech, we can crew this before the end step, target it with our commander at the end step as our creature, since it's an artifact creature once it's crewed, and let us flicker another artifact that isn't a creature, or might be, but is another artifact, giving us the flexibility of flickering this as an artifact or a creature. And it crews for the minimum amount of crew. It's amazing. Really like this card. Next we have Riptide Gearhulk from Aetherdrift. 1 double white and double blue for a 2/5 artifact creature construct with double strike. It already is an artifact creature, so we can flicker it as either one at our end step with our commander. It has prowess, meaning whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And when it enters, for each opponent, we put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its controller's library, into its owner's library, third from the top. So we tuck something for each opponent. If we do this to their commander, they are allowed to put that commander into the command zone rather than into their library. But if they decide to put it in their library and just say, oh, it's third from the top, I'll draw it again eventually, then it stays there. Even if they have to shuffle their library for some reason, they're not going to get to put it in the command zone at that point. They can only put it in there once it's been moved, or when it would be moved to their library. So Riptide Gearhulk is a great way for us to just get rid of 3 non-land permanents, at least for the next few turns, assuming we have 3 opponents. And then every time we flicker this, whether as a creature or our artifact, we get to do it again. And a 2/5 double strike is good on its own, giving it prowess even better. Starfield Shepherd is next. This is another warp creature. This is a 3/2 flying angel for 3 and double white, but of course it warps for 1 and a white. So what we want to do with this is warp it in and then flicker it as our creature at our end step using our commander, meaning it will warp in, we'll get its interest trigger, it will flicker and warp back in, it'll flicker back in, I should say, and we'll get its interest trigger again. But that interest trigger is what? It lets us search our library for a basic Plains card or a creature card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it, put it in our hand, and then shuffle. So since it's not going to the battlefield, it's just going into our hand, it's sort of like drawing a Plains. It's not really a draw, but we're getting a land. That's pretty good. We are not running in this deck any creatures that are mana value 1 or less, but if you wanted to alter this deck so that you can more likely find that 1-drop creature, Starfield Shepherd could do that for you. Pretty good. But in any case, being able to warp this in and then flicker it at the end step means we're going to get 2 Plains in our hand, so we're set up for our land drops either this turn and the next turn, or the next one and the one after that. Pretty solid. On top of a 3/2 flyer. Next we have the Mightstone and Weakstone. This is 5 generic mana for a legendary artifact Power Stone. We'll talk about that in a moment. And it says when it enters, we either choose to draw 2 cards, or a target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. So pretty strong. 5 generic mana to probably kill something, or to draw 2 cards. That's pretty good on its own. Maybe this comes in, we draw 2 cards, and we flicker it, and we draw 2 more cards, or we get to -5/-5 something else. Or maybe an opponent has like a 9/9 creature. This first comes in, we -5 it, so it's a 4/4 now. And then we go to the end step, flicker it with our commander, choose the -5/-5 again, and we kill it. So we've killed a 9/9 over the course of the turn with this. And it still sticks around so that we can hit other things with this removal effect. We can draw more cards later on. Very nice for us. We can also tap it to add 2 colorless mana. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. That is Power Stone mana. What this means is we can use this mana for any other purpose. But just to make it clear, here's 3 ways you can use this. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells, but it can be spent to cast artifacts. So if we wanted to cast an artifact with this, we could tap this for mana, use that mana for it, no problem. We can also use this mana to pay for activations of things. If we have a creature or another permanent that requires us to pay mana in order to activate it, well, that mana is not being spent on a spell at all. It's being spent to activate an ability. So we can use Power Stone mana for that, thereby the Mightstone and Weakstone's 2 colorless mana. We can also use this to pay costs of other sorts. For example, if we target an opponent's creature that has ward, let's say, maybe it has ward 2, paying the ward cost doesn't require us to spend a spell, to cast a spell rather, so we can use this mana to pay that cost. Pretty good. The only thing we can't use this mana for is to cast a spell that does not have the word artifact in its type line. If a spell has the word artifact there, it's an artifact spell. If it doesn't, it's not an artifact spell. So yeah, use this mana in any way we normally would, except when it comes to spells that aren't artifacts. There we go. Next up, we have Anti-Causal Vestige. This is from Edge of Eternities. It's a 6 mana Eldrazi, which is a 7/5. It does not have an enters trigger, it only has a leaves trigger. So when it leaves the battlefield, we draw a card, and then we may put a permanent with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands we control from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. Meaning, if we draw a card, and then we have a land in hand, we can put that land into play no matter how many lands we have in play already, because a land is mana value 0, essentially. It's, mana value 0. So even without any lands in play, that's less than or equal to 0, so there we go. But what we want to do with this is draw a card and get the best thing we have in hand directly onto the battlefield. If we've already got, 5 lands in play, we can put out our Starfield Shepherd, or a Mightstone and Weakstone, or a Riptide Gear Hulk when Anti-Causal Vestige leaves the battlefield. We want to be able to get more value out of that. And obviously, what we're doing with this is flickering it, because it's leaving the battlefield and then returning. So it goes to exile, it comes back to the battlefield. This triggers because it left the battlefield. Great. It also has warp. So we're doing the same thing we were doing with all of our other warp creatures. Instead of paying 6 for this, we pay 4, warp it in, put the delayed trigger on the stack at our end step to resolve after our commander's ability resolves, thereby exiling the Anti-Causal Vestige and triggering its leaves the battlefield effect. And then it comes back into play, and this delayed trigger tries to exile it, but it's a new game object, so it can't find it. Pretty good. It's also worth noting, paying 6 for this is totally fine, just like paying its warp cost of 4, and just letting it go to exile because we want to exile something else with our commander. It's fine to just, have this happen and then cast it for 6 later. Because when it exiles itself, it is still leaving the battlefield. So we still get its trigger. Pretty good. Next up, we have Coveted Jewel. 6 generic mana for an artifact. So we're into the expensive stuff. When it enters, we draw 3 cards, and we can tap it for 3 mana of any one color. Never mind. 6 mana is totally worth it for all that value. We get it in, we get a rebate on our mana right away in the form of tapping it, and we've got 3 cards. We can then go to our end step after drawing those 3 cards and using that mana, flicker this with our commander, draw 3 more cards, and we have that mana to use right away again, maybe for something on an opponent's turn. Who knows? However, this jewel is coveted. So whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attack us and aren't blocked, that player draws 3 cards and gains control of this artifact and untaps it. Unfortunate. That means the jewel is going to get passed around the table whenever someone attacks, and at least one of their creatures aren't blocked. Which is good, actually. It encourages players to attack each other, which means combat damage is getting dealt, which means the game is moving along. The jewel is going to get passed around, and that's pretty good. But there's 2 things to note about this. The first is, it's only triggering whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls attack its controller and aren't blocked. This term here, those creatures aren't blocked, that doesn't mean before the declare blocker step. Like, it makes sense to say, oh, I've attacked with this creature, it's not blocked yet, so it isn't blocked, so this ability triggers. But technically, prior to the declare blocker step, attacking creatures are neither blocked nor unblocked. They don't have a designation either way. The only time this will trigger is if we are attacked, we, the controller of the Coveted Jewel, are attacked by an opponent's creatures, and we've gone to the declare blocker step, and any of those attacking creatures don't get blocked during that step. At that point, during that declare blocker step, after we've gotten a chance to block their creatures, if they then have any creatures that are attacking us and aren't blocked, they will gain control of the jewel, untap it, and draw 3 cards. The other thing that's worth knowing about the Coveted Jewel is this. It's an artifact, which means we can flicker it. We've already covered that. But we have one way in this deck, I believe just one, but we'll talk about it when we get to it, that can flicker something an opponent controls. And it returns to the battlefield under its owner's control. We are the owner of the Coveted Jewel, no matter who controls it at the time. So if we use that effect, which we'll see soon, to flicker the jewel while it's on someone else's playmat, it'll come back into play under our control. We'll draw the 3 cards, it will be untapped so we can use its mana for whatever we need to, and we've got it again. Now, they may attack us again because, again, the jewel is coveted, but that's fine. We have a way to get this back even without having to attack in. So yeah, very nice. Next up, we have Angel of the Runes. This is a 5 and double white for a 5/7 artifact creature angel with flying that says when it enters, we exile up to 2 artifacts and/or enchantments. So straight up, better than disenchant, better than double disenchant, because we're exiling them. When it enters, we just get to get rid of 2 things. Pretty good. They can be artifact creatures or enchantment creatures, even. Just get rid of 2 things on our opponent's boards. And that's sort of all this is doing for us. It's just a 7 mana 5/7 flyer that gets rid of some things when it comes in. It's an artifact creature, so we can flicker it and get this over and over, and that's pretty good. However, it also has plain cycling for 2 generic mana, meaning while it's in our hand, we can pay 2 and discard it to search our library for a plains, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. It does not say a basic plains. It's not basic plain cycling. So we can find one of our dual-typed lands that I mentioned earlier with the Claim Jumper with the Angel of the Runes. So this is a nice card for us to be able to use later in the game when we have plenty of mana to get it out, or if there's a way for us to cheat it out, as we've seen a few of. And we can just have a nice big flyer that removes artifacts and enchantments from our opponent's boards. Or if we get this early and we're looking for more mana, we can pay 2 and discard this to go find ourselves a plains, put it in our hand. Maybe a dual land that's got the plains type, so it helps us in that way too. So good early game, good late game, good all around. Love the Angel of the Runes. Next we have Combat Thresher. This is 7 generic mana for an artifact creature construct that's a 3/3 with double strike, and it says when it enters we draw a card. So obviously, we know why we would want this. It's a 3/3 double strike, and it draws us a card, so we can flicker it and draw more cards. That's already good on its own, except it's 7 mana, so kind of expensive. Luckily, it has Prototype for 2 and a white, meaning we can cast it for 7, and we'll get a 3/3 double strike that when it enters, we draw a card. Or we can cast it for its Prototype cost, meaning 2 and a white, and instead, it will keep all of its characteristics except that it is a 1/1 for 2 and a white, but it still has double strike and still draws us a card. So what we want to do with this is prototype it for 3 mana. Comes in, replaces itself in our hand, and we've got a 1/1 double strike for 3 generic, or for 3 mana value 3. That's pretty fine. Then whenever we can, with our commander, we're going to flicker this. It will leave the battlefield and re-enter with its without its non-standard characteristics, with its standard characteristics, meaning it will come in as a 7 mana 3/3 with double strike that draws us a card. So a 3/3 double strike is already pretty great. Being able to get it with a card is even better. Being able to get it for only 3 mana and a flicker, and we can use either the artifact flicker or the creature flicker that our commander gives us to do this, very, very strong for us. Really like the Thresher. Next up, we are running Curious Colossus from Lorwyn Eclipsed recently. This is 5 and double white for a 7/7 giant warrior that says when it enters, each creature a target opponent controls loses all abilities, becomes a coward in addition to its other types, and has base power and toughness 1/1. Notice that it does not say until end of turn. This is much like the Illithid Harvester, turning things face down and making them into 2/2 horrors with no other abilities. Instead of turning them face down, they just become 1/1 cowards in addition to their other types and lose all other abilities. So it's every creature on an opponent's board, not just the tapped ones like the Illithid Harvester, but it is only one opponent. Luckily, we can flicker the Colossus, and it re-enters, and we hit another opponent with it. I have tagged this, I believe, as one of our Wraths, even though it's not actually killing anything, but it sure is getting rid of all the dangers by just replacing every creature that an opponent has in play with 1/1s. It doesn't actually get rid of those creatures and put 1/1s into play, it just turns the ones they already had into 1/1s, makes them lose all their abilities, and makes them cowards, just for a little bit of a rub-in. So, Curious Colossus, very strong ability for us, and being able to repeat it can really just turn things around for us, especially if an opponent has a really synergistic deck and a commander that's doing a lot of work. That commander is now a 1/1 coward, just like everything else on their battlefield. Or their board, rather. Pretty good. Next is Meteor Golem. Another 7 generic mana artifact creature. This is a golem. It's a 3/3. It says when it enters, we destroy a non-land permanent that an opponent controls. You can see what we're here to do with this. We flicker it, we blow something up, we flicker it again, we blow something else up. It's a 3/3 for us. Sure, sounds great. Love the Meteor Golem. Mere Battlesphere is doing a little bit more for us for the same cost. This is a 4/7 artifact creature mirror construct for 7 generic mana that says when it enters, we make 4 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature tokens. They're just artifact creatures, they're 1/1s, that's fine. But we're getting a 4/7 and 4 1/1s for 7 mana. That's pretty alright. It also says whenever this creature attacks, we can tap any number of untapped mirror we control, and if we do, this creature gets that much as a power bonus until end of turn, and deals that much damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So the Mere Battlesphere, on its face, just comes in with the 4 1/1s. When we attack with it, we can tap all 4 of those 1/1s, make this into an 8/7 until end of turn, and do 4 damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. That seems pretty good to me. But what if we flicker this at our end step with our commander, either as the artifact or creature that our opponent can flicker? Well, then it will come back in and make 4 more mirror artifact creature tokens. So on our next turn when we attack with it, we can tap all 8 of the mirror we have, and it's now a 12/7, doing 8 damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. And we just keep doing that over and over and over. Bigger and bigger Battlesphere. Yeah, this is what it does. Last in this section is Hulking Metamorph. This is another prototype creature. It's 9 generic mana for a 7/7 artifact creature shapeshifter, or we can prototype it for 2 and double blue, and it's a 3/3. But otherwise, it's still a shapeshifter, and it has this ability. We can have this creature enter as a copy of a target artifact or creature we control, except it's an artifact creature in addition to its other types, and its power and toughness are equal to this creature's power and toughness. So this is similar to the Phyrexian Metamorph, except that the Metamorph can come in as a copy of an artifact or creature, and it's an artifact in addition to its other types. This is an artifact creature in addition to its other types. So if we had this come in as one of our artifacts that is not a creature, like, for example, the Coveted Jewel, it's going to come in as a Coveted Jewel artifact creature that's either going to be a 7/7 or a 3/3, depending on whether or not we prototyped it. It has power and toughness based on whether or not we prototyped it. So, as I'm sure you can guess, what we're doing with this is casting it for 4. We're paying 2 in double blue, bringing it in as a copy of something that is a 3/3 artifact creature, then flickering it, and it comes in as a 7/7 artifact creature copy of something. So what we want to do is have this come in, copy something good when we prototype it. So maybe it comes in as the Coveted Jewel, meaning it will come in as a 3/3 Coveted Jewel artifact creature with power and toughness 3/3. That means it will enter, draws 3 cards, because that's what the jewel does. And it does say it can tap for 3 mana, but it can't that turn, because it's coming in as a creature, an artifact creature. And creatures can't use abilities that include the tap symbol when they're summoning sick. So too bad. However, we sure can flicker it at our end step with our commander and have it come in as the Coveted Jewel again. And now it's a 7/7 Coveted Jewel, meaning it'll draw us 3 cards again, and we're doing pretty good. So yeah, Hulking Metamorph is in here for a similar reason to Phyrexian Metamorph, and not quite the same as the Imposter Mech, but kind of a similar deal. So yeah, that is our Blinkables section. We also have just the section of Blink. These are cards that aren't the cards we're trying to blink. These are cards that give us additional blink effects, or something like it. We're going to start with Airbender Ascension, which doesn't actually blink anything, but it can. So for 1 and a white, we get an enchantment that says, when it enters, we airbend up to 1 target creature. We've already seen that on Aang Swift Savior, and why that's so good. This does not have flash, and it can't hit spells anyway. So at sorcery speed, we're getting this in, and we're airbending a creature. That could be an opponent's creature, good way to remove it, at least for now, but it could be one of our creatures if we want to recast it for just 2 generic mana, since that's what airbending does, and get its enters triggers again. Seems pretty good. Airbender Ascension also says whenever a creature we control enters, put a quest counter on this enchantment. That means entering from us casting it from being airbent, or just from entering in any other way, like us flickering it. So Airbender Ascension can get quest counters quite quickly with this deck. It also says at the beginning of our end step, if this enchantment has 4 or more quest counters on it, we flicker something. We exile a target creature we control and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So it's worth noting that this trigger goes on the stack at the same time as our commander's trigger. So if we have a creature and an artifact in play, and Airbender Ascension has 4 quest counters on it, we go to our end step and we choose the creature with Airbender Ascension. If we also choose that creature with our commander, then it's not going to flicker twice, because the first time it flickers, it will leave the battlefield, come back as a new game object, and then the second flicker effect will go off and won't be able to find the card because it isn't there anymore. The original permanent that it had targeted left the battlefield before that ability got to resolve. So Airbender Ascension is here to get us value from us flickering things, because it gets counters when it enters, and eventually become a Conjurer's Closet, because it has that same text once it has the 4 quest counters on it. So this is us getting to flicker more things than just a single creature and artifact from our command that our commander lets us do. So a nice way to get even more value, since we've got so many blinkable things, we shouldn't just be blinking them with our commander, we should get more out of it. Airbender Ascension lets us do that after just a short wait, and gives us the ability to remove something that our opponent controls, or rebuy one of our own things, and thereby put its first quest counter on it. Next we have Touch the Spirit Realm. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment that says when it enters, exile up to 1 target artifact or creature until this leaves the battlefield. So it's similar to the All Fate Stalker. It's an Oblivion Ring, or a Banishing Light, whatever you want to think of it that way as. It's a removal piece, getting rid of an artifact or a creature. And that's what it's normally used for. But it also has a channel ability, meaning we can pay 1 and a white and discard it from our hand to exile an artifact or creature and return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So that means this is what's called what I refer to as a slow flicker. It doesn't flicker it immediately, or it doesn't return immediately. It exiles and only comes back at the beginning of the next end step. That doesn't happen that much in this deck, but it does happen here. And this is the card that can get our coveted jewel back because it says exile target artifact or creature. It does not say that you control. So we could channel Touch the Spirit Realm to get back our coveted jewel if we wanted to, or anything else that an opponent might have stolen, because it comes back under its owner's control. So this is a way for us to, at instant speed, since this does not say activate only as a sorcery, flicker something. It lets us protect our commander, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if someone tries to target it with something, or even target it with a board wipe. Because normally, if you flicker something, it comes right back in. If you do that in response to a board wipe, well, it's still going to happen. And it's just going to have come back in, and that creature then dies. But this is a slow flicker. So it means if an opponent plays Day of Judgment, we can channel Touch the Spirit Realm on our commander. It will go to exile. We can then put it in the command zone if we want to, but we will not want to. We won't choose to. And then Day of Judgment will resolve. Everything gets wiped. And we have our delayed trigger at the end step that will return our commander into play. And we're all set. So we've protected our commander. We can do this with other things. We can flicker lots and lots of stuff with Touch the Spirit Realm. Any artifact or creature, obviously. And if we don't want to do that with it, well, it's always a good removal effect for an artifact or creature that we want to get rid of. Pretty good. We've seen the All Fate Stalker, actually. It is a similar effect, but only a non-assassin creature, although we can do tricks with it with its warp ability. Next, we have Avatar's Wrath. This is another, obviously, Avatar the Last Airbender card. It is our other Wrath in the deck. This is 2 and double white for a sorcery that says choose up to 1 target creature, then airbend all other creatures. That's not our creatures. Or that's not just our creatures. That's everyone's creatures. We don't even have to target one of our creatures. It can be an opponent's creature. It's just 1 target creature, and then airbend every other creature on the battlefield. Which again, it means exile them, and while they're exiled, respecting normal timing rules, their owners can cast each one of them for 2 generic mana rather than their mana cost. Except, until our next turn, opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So they don't even get to rebuild their board until the turn after their next turn. But we can. And then, as part of resolution, we exile Avatar's Wrath, because they don't want you to be able to recur this. So this is a nice way to totally wipe the board, and we get a lot more out of this than our opponents, not just because we can rebuild our board right away, but because our deck is built around our creatures entering for the most part, built around our things entering for the most part. So we get more value, since we're getting to do it a second time, than our opponents generally do when their stuff comes in. Pretty sweet. Next is Pegasus Guardian. This is another adventure creature. So on its face, Pegasus Guardian is 5 and a white for a 3/3 Pegasus that says, at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, make a 1/1 white Pegasus creature token with flying. So this is a little bit of a payoff for us. It gives us the ability to get free 1/1 flyers as long as we had anything leave the battlefield this turn. Now, it doesn't have to have left the battlefield and come back. It doesn't have to have left the battlefield by dying, as long as it happens somehow. However, this is one of those situations where if we haven't had anything leave the battlefield until our end step, when our commander flickers some things, this won't trigger at all. It has to have we have to have had something leave the battlefield prior to our end step for this ability to trigger. But if it did, we'll get a Pegasus out of it, and that's pretty good. It also has an instant adventure, Rescue the Foal, for 1 and a white. We can exile a creature we control and then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control, which is to say, just flicker one of our creatures. What does that do for us? Well, it means that something left the battlefield this turn, so we get a 1/1 Pegasus from it. So very nice to be able to use this to protect our commander, or to just get more value out of one of our creatures. And then, if we have things that are leaving the battlefield during our turn, maybe they're tokens that are dying, maybe they're other things that we're flickering, Pegasus Guardian's going to reward us for this. It doesn't give us as many rewards as it normally would in a blink deck, because we're not usually blinking things before the end step. But it's still pretty nice for us, and it's a 3/3 flyer. Last in this section, we have a Final Fantasy card. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy, so let me know if I'm pronouncing this wrong. This is Y'shtola Rule. Y'shtola is 4 and double blue for a 3/5 legendary cat druid that says, at the beginning of our end step, we exile target creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Again, this is Conjurer's Closet. It's what our commander's already doing for one of our creatures, so this lets us do it for another creature, getting even more value. However, then, if it's the first end step of the turn, there is an additional end step after this step. So this is really strong for us. It lets us flicker something with Y'shtola and any of our other end step triggers, like flickering 2 things with our commander. That's our end step. We finish our end step, we get all the triggers and resolutions of abilities from that, and then we have another end step, which triggers Y'shtola again, and triggers our commander again. We get to flicker things a second time. Obviously, we can't target the same creature with Y'shtola and our commander and flicker them both in the same end step, but we could do 2 different creatures plus an artifact during the first end step, and then do that again for our second end step. It only happens twice, but Y'shtola lets us have it happen twice, and that's so much value for this deck. So of course we want to run this little cat druid. That is our Blink section. We've got one more section of our game plan. It is our cheats. So we've seen a lot of these, but not all of them. So Cryptic Coat, as we've seen, lets us cloak a card when it first comes in, which we can then flicker as a creature, even if it's not a creature card underneath it. As long as the card itself is a permanent card, great. It's going to re-enter the battlefield as itself, face up. And we've got the Cryptic Coat that we can either flicker as our artifact to make it cloak something else, or we could bounce it to our hand and have it and just be able to recast it. So I do want to make mention, we've only got 5 cards in the deck that are not permanent cards. So basically everything that the Cryptic Coat can cloak, we're going to be able to do something good with. Halia is one of our warp cards. Of course, we're including all the warp cards in this section. Scroll of Fate is next. Scroll of Fate is 3 generic mana for an artifact that if we tap it, we manifest a card from our hand. That means we take a card from our hand, put it on the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature, and we can turn it face up at any time for its mana cost if it's a creature card. This is the same as a card that we got into play through Manifesting Dread, because Manifest predates Manifest Dread as a mechanic. It also works the same way Cloak does in that way, except that a manifested card, unlike a cloaked card, does not have Ward 2. It's the only difference. Like I mentioned at the start, Cryptic Cloak is the only card that cloaks things, so it's the only thing that will make face down cards 2/2s with Ward 2. Otherwise, they're just face down 2/2s, no Ward. But this is nice because it lets us take a card from our hand and just put it directly into play as a creature, and then we can go to our end step, our commander can flicker that creature, and whatever permanent we put into play is now entering the battlefield face up as itself. Pretty sweet. We've seen the All Fate Stalker. It lets us warp it in. That's pretty good. The Starfield Vocalist also warps in, and we can cheat it in that way, but it does something new for us. This is 3 and a blue for a 3/4 human bard with warp for 1 and a blue, which of course means we're going to warp it in and flicker it with our commander at our end step. So we didn't have to pay 4 mana for our 3/4. We got to only pay 2 mana. That's pretty good on its own. But even better is, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. This is the Panharmonicon effect for our deck. Very, very strong. It means if Halia enters and Starfield Vocalist is in play, then Halia sees itself enter, which means a permanent has entered the battlefield and has caused the triggered ability of a permanent itself to trigger, so it will trigger an additional time. Halia will enter and will gain 2 life off of her entering, because her first ability will trigger twice. However, if she's in play, and then the Starfield Vocalist enters, it will still trigger twice, because Starfield Vocalist is a permanent entering the battlefield, and it's causing an ability of a permanent we control to trigger. So it will trigger twice and will gain 2 life that way either, as well. Starfield Shepherd comes in, the Vocalist makes it trigger twice, we get to find 2 basic planes from our library. All Fate Stalker comes in, Starfield Vocalist makes it trigger twice, and we get to exile 2 non-assassin creatures until it leaves the battlefield. Very, very strong in our deck, even stronger than it would be in most decks. So yeah, nice. Dissection Tools is next. We've already seen it. It lets us manifest Dread, which, just like with the card we manifest from Scroll of Fate or the card we cloak with Cryptic Cloak, we can flicker that creature and we get it back as its front face. So we don't just get interest triggers from it, we get that in without us having to pay for it. That's pretty good. Starfield Shepherd, we can warp in. So again, warp is letting us do these fun cheats. They Came from the Pipes is our other Manifest Dread card. 4 and a blue for an enchantment that says when it enters, we manifest dread twice. That means we look at the top card of our library, choose one of them to go into the graveyard, choose the other one to go into play as a 2/2 creature face down. That of course we can flicker later on and get it face up. So pretty sweet for us to be able to get 2 of these things into play, because we're going to do that process twice. Look at the top 2, one in play, one into the graveyard. Then we look at the next 2, one into play, one in the graveyard. And that's pretty good. The other thing that's nice about it is that whenever a face down creature we control enters, we draw a card. Well, when this entered, that just happened twice. We put 2 creatures into play face down, or we put 2 face down cards into play that are creatures. So we'll draw 2 cards off of this. So for 5 mana, we get 2 things that we get to flicker, and we draw 2 cards. Not only that, but it becomes it gives us the ability to turn all of our other things, Scroll of Fate, Cryptic Coat, and Dissection tools that bring things into play face down, turns those into card, it gives us card draw off of that. It's pretty sweet. The only thing that They Came from the Pipes lacks for us is the ability for us to flicker it, because it is not an artifact or creature. But maybe there's a way around that. We'll just have to see. Just give me some time and we'll get to it. Next up, we've seen on Anti-Causal Vestige, it lets us warp it in, so that's what we're cheating with that. Combat Thresher and Hulking Metamorph both can be prototyped in for cheaper than their cost, so that's how we're cheating on those. And that is our cheats section. As we have plenty of other cards in this deck, many of which supplement our game plan. But that is sort of the core of the game plan, what we've seen so far. Our Blinkables, our ways to blink things, and our several things that we're going to be cheating our permanents into play with. So I want to go into the cards that supplement our game plan, but before I do, we've got these 3 sections of support for that game plan. This is us eating our vegetables to go along with our delicious main course. So let's start our support section with card advantage. As usual, I've used the word draw here just to shorthand the idea of card advantage. It doesn't mean that all of these cards actually draw a card for us, but they do let us touch new cards and let us get them get to play them a little bit better, or a little bit. It gives us the ability to play more cards. There we go. Thank goodness. Forgive me. So Collector's Cage, we've already seen. It comes in, hides away 5, and we can easily get to cast that card without its mana cost once we put a counter on one of our creatures, and then we flicker it and we do it again. Cryogen Relic enters, we draw a card, leaves, we draw a card. We're going to be doing both of those. We saw Dour Port Mage at the start of the video, but let's talk about it now. For 1 and a blue, this is a 1/3 Frog Wizard that says whenever 1 or more creatures we control leave the battlefield without dying, we draw a card. So every time we flicker any number of creatures, we will draw 1 card, because it's 1 or more creatures. But it's every time we do that, so we'll draw a bunch of cards. In addition, we can pay 1 and a blue and tap it to return another target creature we control to its owner's hand. So as we can't bounce the mage itself, the Port Mage, but we can bounce any of our other creatures and then cast them again to rebuy their effects. We might do this with something like our Imposter Mech. We animate it or we crew it rather, making it into an artifact creature. It's now a creature, so we can bounce it with the mage. We replay it, it comes in as something else. That seems fun. Limbus, we've seen already. It enters, lets us scry one and draw a card. We have not seen Mind Stone. Mind Stone is actually in this deck for acceleration, but we do get to draw off of it if we want to. For 2 generic mana, we get an artifact that taps for a single colorless mana. So this is a mana rock. It's an artifact that taps to make mana. And that's really what we wanted in this deck for, but we can also pay 1, tap, and sacrifice it to draw a card. So the idea behind this being, we want to use this for mana as early as we can in the game, and then later on, when we need cards more than we need mana, we can cash this in for a card. Pretty good. Wall of Omens, we've already seen. It enters, we draw. Pretty good. Ether Channeler, when it enters, one of the things we can do is draw. That's good. Candlekeep Sage is next. This is an enchantment, a legendary enchantment background, which means it gives our commander an ability. It's 2 and a blue, And it says commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. So with Candlekeep Sage in play, if we flicker Leo and Dawn, we get to draw 2 cards because they will leave and re-enter the battlefield. If we have this in play before we play them for the first time, they'll enter and we'll draw a card off of them. So this makes it so not only is our commander getting a lot of value out of our other cards, we can also get more value out of them themselves if we want to choose to flicker them. We've seen Circuit Mender. Circuit Mender gains us 2 when it comes in and draws us a card when it leaves. Halia gives us card draw at our end step if, prior to that, we've gained 3 life. Lauren, we can tap to have us and an opponent draw a card. Rumor Gatherer is next. This is a card I truly love to play in decks like this. From Streets of New Capenna, one of my favorite sets, this is 1 and double white for a 2/1 elf wizard with an alliance ability. Alliance means it triggers whenever another creature we control enters. So when that happens, we scry 1. And if it's the second time this is resolved this turn, instead we draw a card. So if we were to flicker if we play the Rumor Gatherer and then we play another creature, this will trigger the first time and we'll scry 1. If we flicker that other creature at the end step, this will trigger again, it will be the second time it resolves, and so we'll draw a card instead. If there's more creatures that would enter after we draw that card, each of those times we just scry 1. It's only the second time, not every other time, for each turn that it resolves. We've seen the Guard Mage. It gains us 3 life and draws a card for us when it enters. We haven't seen Sally Sparrow. This is 2, a white, and a blue for a 2/3 legendary human detective from the Doctor Who set. Sally gives us the ability to cast creature spells as though they had flash, so we can cast our creatures on our opponent's turns and surprise them. That seems pretty good. If we're able to cast things at flash speed, we ought to. It lets us, at the very least, cast whatever we want to cast during the end step of our opponent to the right, so right before our turn begins. In addition, whenever 1 or more creatures we control leave the battlefield, we investigate, but only once each turn. Investigate means we make a clue token. Clues are artifacts that if we pay 2 and sacrifice them, we draw a card. So this is slow card draw for us, but it's going to happen basically every end step with our commander in play, so pretty nice for us. It's also a great way if we have, let's say, flickered our Coveted Jewel or our Mightstone Weakstone. We get those enters triggers from those artifacts, but they make mana, and we can use that mana on our opponent's turns, but what are we going to use it on? Well, Sally gives us a way to use them by giving us clue tokens, as long as we're flickering creatures as well. Pretty good. We've seen Saravek's Tome. It gives us the ability to, it enters and we take the initiative. It's in this section because the first room of taking the initiative is Lay of the Land. Search your library for a basic land, put it in your hand, shuffle. Reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So that, at the very least, Saravek's Tome, when it first comes in, draws us a basic land, essentially. So yeah. Solemn Simulacrum, when it dies, we can draw a card. Aerial Extortionist draws us cards anytime other players cast spells from somewhere other than their hand. Cloudblazer enters and draws us 2 cards and gains us 2 life. Starfield Shepherd enters and draws us a basic plains, essentially. Mightstone and Weakstone, when it enters, one of the things we can do is draw 2 cards. They Came from the Pipes lets us draw a card whenever a face-down creature we control enters, and it will do that twice itself when it first comes in. Anti-Causal Vestige doesn't draw us it does draw us a card, really, when it leaves the battlefield, but also lets us put something into play, which is also very strong card advantage. Coveted Jewel draws us 3 whenever it comes in, when it enters under our control. Angel of the Ruins doesn't draw us any cards unless we planescycle it, which is essentially drawing us a plains. And of course, Combat Thresher lets us draw a card when it enters. So that's our card advantage section. Let's talk now about our acceleration, which again, I've just shorthanded as ramp. We are running Soul Ring because it's the best mana rock you can run. For 1 generic mana, it's an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. Very, very powerful. It's a symbol of the format. Put it in your deck. Wayfarer's Bauble is also great. This is 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we get 2 Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffled. This is excellent in a deck that's not playing green, so we want to be able to get more lands into play. In addition, it's an artifact, which might be relevant for some of our other things that care about the number of artifacts we have if we don't need it for ramping effects. Arcane Signet is another almost auto-include. This is 2 generic mana for an untapped artifact that taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, white or blue. An untapped 2 mana rock is very strong, so yeah, we're going to run it. Azorius Signet is another untapped 2 mana rock, 2 for an artifact, but we have to pay 1 into it and tap it to get mana out of it. However, when we do, it gives us a white and a blue. So we're tapping 2 mana sources, something that we use to activate this and the Signet itself, and we're getting 2 mana. So we like to think of this as filtering the mana into our 2 colors, but it filters into our 2 colors. Those are the colors we want to use, so very good. Liquimetal Torque is next. This is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 colorless. It's an untapped 2 mana rock, pretty good. But it also lets us tap it, and target non-land permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. It becoming an artifact is relevant for our Gnome Soldiers tokens that care about the number of artifacts we have, but more importantly, it becomes something we can flicker with our commander. So we were talking about they came from the pipes, that enchantment that lets us manifest dread twice and lets us draw a card every time we have a creature interface down. It was too bad that we couldn't flicker it, but with Liquimetal Torque we can. It becomes an artifact enchantment. It's an artifact in addition to its other types. So at our end step, we get to use our commander to flicker an artifact. We flicker that artifact. It will come back in. It won't be an artifact anymore, but it doesn't matter. It's entered. It's an enchantment. We manifest dread twice. We draw 2 cards off of it. Very good. Liquimetal Torque can do lots of fun stuff for us with this, even if all we want to do is flicker 2 of our creatures. But we can't flicker 2 creatures. We can only flicker a creature and an artifact. So we use the Torque to make one of those creatures into an artifact, and we flicker it as an artifact. It comes back in not as an artifact, but that's okay with us. We got the flicker. So yeah, Liquimetal Torque, very strong for us in this deck. Mind Stone, we've already seen. 2 mana rock that taps for colorless, and we can sack it to draw a card. Talisman of Progress is another 2 mana rock. 2 mana for an artifact that taps for colorless, or we can tap it for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. This is awesome in this deck, because it means we're in a situation where we need mana, so we're going to tap it for colorless. But if we need colored mana, rather than colorless mana, it means that tapping the Talisman of Progress and taking a damage is the difference between us casting a spell or not. Would you cast a spell if it had a 1 mana surcharge or 1 damage surcharge on it in order to cast it? In order to cast it for like 1 mana less otherwise? Absolutely you would. Being able to trade a life for a colored mana is such a great deal that it's totally worth doing, especially because most of the time, especially in this deck that has so much land in it and so much acceleration, we can normally tap this without having to worry about taking damage from it. But if we need that color fixing, we've got the ability to do it, so we might as well. Very strong. Claim Jumper, we've seen before. It gives us the ability to catch up our lands, which is not hard for us to arrange a way for us to do, especially since we can flicker this, and so if some other player has ramped harder than us, we can catch up with them then. Ceravec's Tome lets us tap it for colorless mana, or 2 colorless mana if we have the initiative. Solemn Simulacrum comes in and rampant growths us. Mightstone and Weakstone can tap for 2 colorless mana, that's Power Stone mana, can't be spent on non-artifact spells. And Coveted Jewel taps for 3 mana of any color. Very good. That is our acceleration section. Let's talk about interaction, which, as usual, I've tagged as removal, just for a shorthand. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares are essentially the same card with one difference. They are both instants, they both cost a single white mana, they both exile a target creature, and they both give that creature's controller a little kickback. Swords to Plowshares exiles a creature, and its controller gains life equal to its power. Path to Exile exiles a target creature, and its controller rampant growths, searches for a basic, puts it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Otherwise, they're essentially the same card, and they're both amazing cards. Both totally worth running in every white deck. Excellent premium removal, unconditional exile for a creature for a single white mana at instant speed. Gotta love it. We've seen Airbender Ascension. It airbends a creature when it first comes in. That's good. Cryogen Relic is technically removal in a minor way. It lets us stun something that's already tapped, so it's sort of out of our hair for another turn. Aang lets us airbend a creature or spell when Aang enters. That's good interaction. Ether Channeler lets us bounce a non-land permanent when it enters, and we can flicker it and do that again. Pretty good. Imprisoned in the Moon is 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker, and it makes that permanent into a colorless land that taps for colorless mana and loses all other card types and abilities. So this is us spending 3 mana to turn anything that's bothering us, that's a creature or planeswalker or land, into a land and nothing else. Oftentimes, this is a way we shut down our opponent's commander. We take a big valuable commander and make it into a land, because unless that player has a way to interact with their own lands or has a way to remove an aura, it's just going to stay that way. Interacting with enchantments is not that uncommon, but it seems pretty uncommon compared to what a lot of people do. Most players don't run enough removal, and the removal they run is mostly creature-based. So unless they have something that can also hit an enchantment, or just hits an enchantment, their commander is just going to remain there. They can't even bounce it, because they'd have to be able to bounce something that is a land. So yeah, Imprisoned to the Moon is a very strong removal spell for us, but not like back-breaking like some other spells are. So yeah, a nice option for us. We've seen Lauren of the Third Path. She comes in and destroys an artifact or enchantment. Good way to get rid of Imprisoned to the Moon. It might be the case that we imprison in the moon someone's commander and extort them. Say, if you ignore me for the rest of the game, I will use Lauren, flicker her, and remove it. And they'll be like, well, then I'll definitely lose. It's like, yes, perhaps you will. That's a terrible play. Don't make that play. That's bad politics. Touch the Spirit Realm lets us O-ring something. It lets us exile an artifact or creature until it leaves the battlefield. Very nice. All Fate Stalker lets us do the same thing, but to a non-assassin creature only. Aerial Extortionist, when it enters or deals combat damage to a player, lets us exile any non-land permanent, and its owner can cast it again, but they have to cast it again. And when they do, we'll draw a card off of it. Illithid Harvester lets us tap a bunch of things, and those things don't untap during their controller's next untap steps, but also, when it enters, any number of target tapped non-token creatures, we can turn face down, and they're just permanently 2/2 horrors. So, dealt with. Riptide Gearhulk lets us tuck a non-land permanent for each of our opponents into their library third from the top. The Mightstone and Weakstone comes in, and we can -5/-5 a creature. Angel of the Runes comes in, and we get to exile 2 artifact or enchantments, up to 2. And of course, Meteor Golem can blow up any non-land permanent once it enters. So that's our interaction section. We are running 2 Wraths that I've mentioned already. Avatar's Wrath works for us by airbending every creature except for 1, and preventing our opponents from casting spells from somewhere other than their hand until our next turn. And Curious Colossus doesn't actually kill everything in play, but it does make every creature that one of our opponents controls a 1/1 coward with no abilities. Permanently. Pretty good. Those are our Wraths, and therefore that is the end of our support section. Let's talk about our supplemental sections now, starting with our Payoffs. Payoffs are cards that reward us for doing the things we were going to do anyway. Dour Portmage draws us a card when 1 or more of our creatures leave the battlefield without dying. Rumor Gatherer lets us scry every time we have creatures enter, and if it's the second time, instead of scrying, we get to draw a card. Genku Future Shaper is next. This is 2 a white and a blue for a 2/5 legendary Moonfolk Wizard that says whenever another non-token permanent we control leaves the battlefield, we choose one of these following that hasn't been chosen this turn, and we make a token with those characteristics. We make either a 2/2 white fox with vigilance, a 1/2 blue moonfolk with flying, or a 1/1 black rat with lifelink. So every time we have stuff leave, which is going to be twice during our end step, thanks to our commander, basically every turn, we're going to get some token friends. In addition, Genku lets us pay 3 a white and a blue to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. Now those counters of course go away if we then flicker the creature that has them, but pretty nice to be able to pump up our whole team once we get a lot of mana, or we slowly build things up and pump up our commander. Or Genku themselves. Sally Sparrow, we've already seen. Sally lets us investigate every time one or more of our creatures leaves the battlefield. We've seen the Pegasus Guardian at our end step. If one of our permanents left the battlefield this turn, we make a 1/1 flying Pegasus creature token. And we have Blessed Sanctuary. This is 3 and double white for an enchantment that prevents all non-combat damage that would be dealt to us and our creatures. It does say non-combat, so if someone attacks us and does damage in the combat damage step, those creatures are doing combat damage. So Blessed Sanctuary doesn't prevent that. But if someone tries to do a lightning bolt to us, or tries to have one of their creatures fight ours, that is damage happening outside the combat damage step, so it is non-combat damage. Blessed Sanctuary prevents all of it. But why is it in this section? Because whenever a non-token creature we control enters, we make a 2/2 white unicorn creature token. I want to make a point to you. This card is from Original Jumpstart. Original Jumpstart didn't have tokens printed. So you're going to have to find something to act as a 2/2 white unicorn creature token. They might have them now. I think Blessed Sanctuary maybe got reprinted. It got reprinted in Jumpstart 22, which means it still doesn't have tokens. So there are, I think, 2/2 white unicorn creature tokens out there, but just use something to stand in for this, because every time we have any non-tokens enter, we're getting a 2/2 in addition. Very nice. That is our payoff section. We have a synergy section as well. These are cards that are doing things for us, not rewarding us for what we were already doing. That's a payoff. Synergy are things that help us do our things in a better way. Liquid Metal Torque, we've already seen. It lets us flicker our artifacts, or flicker any of our non-lands that aren't artifacts as artifacts. Starfield Vocalist gives us the ability to double all of our triggers, doing a lot more, getting a lot more of our value from our things we were already going to get value from. Similarly, Y'shtola Rule gives us the ability to get a second instep trigger, or a second instep rather. So all of our instep triggers, including hers, or theirs, I guess, and our commanders will trigger again, and we'll get even more value. So those are our synergy cards. We have, a tokens section. So these are cards that make tokens for us one way or another. Ether Channeler can make us a 1/1 bird when it comes in. Genku, whenever we have non-token permanents leave the battlefield, can make us a fox, a moon, folk, or a rat. Thousand Moon Smithy, either on its front side or when we use the mana of its back side, makes us one of these gnome soldiers with power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures we control. Whirler Rogue enters and makes us 2/1/1 Thopters that fly. Blessed Sanctuary makes us 2/2 unicorns whenever our non-token creatures enter. Geist Honored Monk enters and makes us 2 flying 1/1 white spirit creature tokens. Pegasus Guardian makes us these 1/1 flying white Pegasus creature tokens. And Mirror Battlesphere makes us the 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature tokens. Lots of ways to make tokens. It's not our win con, but it's only 8 cards, but so many of them can make tokens so many times, it really can get out of hand, and it can be a lot of fun. Our next section is our pump section. These are cards that make our other creatures bigger. Collector's Cage, as we know, we can pay 1 and tap it to put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control, and then we can play the Hidden Away card if we then have Coven, 3 creatures with differing powers. But even without that, we can just use it to put counters on things. Aang Swift Savior doesn't pump our creatures up, but Aang and Law does. When it attacks, each of our tapped creatures gets a 1/1 counter. And we already saw Genku. We can pay 3, a white and a blue, to put a 1/1 counter on each of our creatures. That is our pump section. We have a protection section. These are cards that protect us or our creatures. We've seen all but one of them. Dour Port Mage gives us the ability to bounce another target creature we control back to its owner's hand, and we can do that at instant speed. So we might want to hold this up, and we likely will, because we're probably not attacking with our little 1/3. We want it to be there so we get our card drawn when we have our creatures leave the battlefield. But we might keep this held up to protect our commander. Just replay our commander if someone tries to target it with something. Pretty good. Aang Swift Savior can protect us by airbending a spell, or also use this as interaction to airbend a creature. Touch the Spirit Realm, we can protect something by using its channel ability to slow flicker one of our artifacts or creatures, again, until the next end step. Blessed Sanctuary protects us and our creatures from non-combat damage. And Pegasus Guardian's Rescue the Foal instant is another instant speed flicker effect that we can use to protect things. The only other card we have in this section is Swiftfoot Boots, because we love our commander and we want to protect it, or protect any other creature we may have. So this is 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Being able to flicker our things to protect them is pretty great for us. Making it so our opponents can't target them in the first place is also great. And then if our opponent wipes the board, we have to recast our commander or whatever, that's also fine. The Swifties re-equip for a single mana. No big deal. That is our protection section. We have an evasion section as well. This, we've already seen these as well. Cryptic Coat makes it so that the card that it cloaks and attaches itself to has +1/+0 and is unblockable. So that's pretty solid for us. And we also have Whirler Rogue that lets us tap 2 untapped artifacts we control to make a creature unblockable. Doesn't even have to be one we control, but it likely will be. So pretty sweet ways for us to be evasive with our creatures. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. We're going to go over our land base now, as I often do, starting with our basics. They're right here. We've got 22 basics in this deck. Obviously, we're running Ninja Turtle basics. 10 islands and 12 plains. I wanted to keep it pretty close to each other because we have a pretty even split for our colors, but we are a little bit more white. So that's what we've got going on with our basics. We're running Irrigated Farmland as a bicycle land. Bicycle lands are typed duels. This is a plains and an island. So if we want to go find ourselves a plains card, as long as it doesn't say basic, we can find the Irrigated Farmland. Because it's a plains and an island, it just inherently taps for white or blue. So very nice for us, and it's a typed duel. It does come in tapped, but if we want, we can also cycle it. While it's in our hand, we can pay 2 generic mana, discard it, and draw a card. So if we find a way to find a plains and put it in our hand, I think the only cards we have that put our lands in hand are basics, but in any case, if this is in our hand, early on, we can play it as a land. If we no longer need land, we can just cycle it. By cycle, because it's 2 and cycling. So yeah. This is a solid card. If you wanted to upgrade this, there are several cards in this deck that you might upgrade with a Shockland, but the Hallowed Fountain Shockland would be an okay upgrade to Irrigated Farmland. It's just much more expensive. Glacial Fortress is next. This is the check land. It is a land that comes in tapped unless we control a plains or an island, and it taps for white or blue. Considering we have 22 basic lands in this deck, plus 4 other lands that are typed duels, that's 26 of the cards in the deck that are likely to make the Glacial Fortress come in untapped. If you wanted to get a Deserted Beach, the slow land, as an upgrade for this, upgrade quote unquote, you could, but it's much more expensive, and in this deck, it's very likely this is going to come in untapped on its own. So that's what I would stick with. Sky Cloud Expanse, is a filter land. This is the same text as our Azorius Signet, but on a land. So everything I said about the Signet also applies here. It's very strong, gives us our colors, we just have to pay mana into it in order to be able to use it. We have 4 fixing lands. Command Tower is basically Arcane Signet, but as a land, if you want to think of it that way. It's an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, which means a white or a blue. Totally fine. We want to run this untapped dual land as much as we can. You know what? We would run this if it was a tapped dual land. In fact, we are. It's Path of Ancestry. This is a land that comes in tapped and has the same text as Command Tower. But it also says, when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. That's pretty great. Our commander is a mutant, a ninja, and a turtle. And we have 0 cards in the deck that are also mutants, ninjas, and turtles. That's fine. Our commander shares types with itself. Meaning if we use this to cast our commander, we get a scry. Otherwise, this is a tapped dual land, which is totally fine. We've got some others of those. This has a little bit of upside, and that's great. Myriad Landscape is next. This is a tapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. So either 2 basic plains or 2 basic islands. Then we put those on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So this is a land that comes in tapped. It requires us to pay mana and sacrifice it to find more lands, and those lands come in tapped. So even though that's slow, this is us making 1 land drop and eventually having 2 color-producing lands in play. So this is very slow acceleration for us, but acceleration nonetheless. Pretty alright. We also have Temple of the False God. I know not everyone loves this card, but I think for the power level of decks that I build, it's perfect, and it is very strong, just not early on. This is an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Sol Ring. This is a Sol land. We just can't activate it unless we have at least 4 other lands in play, so 5 or more lands including itself. So even though if our opening hand is, an island and a Temple of the False God and no other lands or mana rocks, we probably want to mulligan that. Getting this into play earlier than turn 5 and having it tap for mana is definitely possible in this deck. And having it tap for mana even after turn 5 is great for us because we have a lot of big expensive things that we can't always cheat into play. So Temple of the False God accelerates us a little bit and helps us do that. We are running Adhikar Wastes as our pain land. This is, if our filter land we saw earlier is Arcane Signet, this is our Talisman of Progress. It's the same text. Taps for colorless or taps for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. Everything I said about that before is still true here. This is a great land for us as a untapped duel if we need it to be. We're running Hingegate Pathway because I love the pathways. Little expensive compared to our other lands, but very strong flexibility for us. It comes in tapped, or it comes in untapped, and we can tap it for blue or for white. Or we can play it on its backside and tap it for blue. Pretty sweet for us. It's also possible, now this is a crazy thing to do, but you can do it in the deck, so I want to bring it up. If we play this as Mistgate Pathway, so in tapping it for blue, and we decide we need white mana, and we have our commander and Liquimetal Torque in play, we can use Liquimetal Torque. Liquimetal Torque works on non-lands, so never mind. I was about to give you a trick that will not work in this deck. Do not worry about it. Just put the pathway in your deck because it's a good card. Next we have a reveal land. I don't typically run these in my decks, but Port Town is pretty solid for us in a deck that has so many basics and dual-typed lands. So this is a land that says, as it enters, we may reveal a plains or island card from our hand. If we don't, this comes in tapped, and it taps for white or blue. We have 26 cards that are plains and or islands in our deck, and we have a lot of card draw in this deck. So the chances of us having one other land in our hand that happens to have one or both of those basic types is pretty high when we play the Port Town. If it's not, that's okay. We still get a tapped dual land, and that still helps us fine. So yeah, likely to be an untapped duel, but even if it's tapped, totally okay. Similarly is, or I guess not that similarly, is Temple of Enlightenment. This is a land that's always tapped and taps for white or blue, and when it comes in, we scry one. So as opposed to the conditional scry of Path of Ancestry, which we might get more than one time if we have to cast our commander multiple times, this is a guaranteed scry when it comes in, and it's both of our colors. We could upgrade this to Meticulous Archive, the Surveil land, if we want to. A lot more expensive than this 15-cent reprint. So yeah, there we go. I should mention also, Port Town, if you wanted to upgrade this to Flood Farm Verge, the Verge land would be pretty sweet. I still think this is probably better because it's much less expensive and still going to be great in this deck. But yeah, if you want to do an upgrade, you have the ability to do so. We're running Prairie Stream as our Tango land. This is another dual-typed land. It's a plains and an island. It taps for white or blue, and it comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. Not basic types, they have to be actual basic plains and or basic islands. But if we have that, and we've got so many in this deck, so it's likely to be the case, this comes in as an untapped duel. Pretty great for us. Finally, in this section, not quite finally, I should say, we have 2 cards that are just typed duels, Idyllic Beachfront and Glacial Floodplain. They are almost exactly the same card. They are typed lands that come in tapped, and so tap for those colors, and that's all that's interesting about them. We can just find these with things like Claim Jumper if we need to. The only difference between them is Idyllic Beachfront is a plain old dual land. Glacial Floodplain is a snow land, which is not relevant in this deck, so mechanically for us they are the same thing, but look at this great Sarah Finnegan art. Love it. Our last 2 lands are pretty simple. Demolition Field is a way for us to deal with problematic non-basics. In the kind of decks I build, and at most of the tables that people play at, land destruction is frowned upon. People don't enjoy playing with that. And that's fair. But you have to have something that can deal with a non-basic land that is either helping someone's game plan too much, like a Rogue's Passage in a Voltron deck, or hindering our own game plan, like a Maze of Ith, or a Glacial Chasm, something like that. Demolition Field is the most fair answer to those sorts of things that helps us as well. So this is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. That opponent then gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land. Their land is replaced with a basic, our Demolition Field is replaced with a basic. Assuming, of course, we both have basics left in our libraries, and we ought to. But we've gotten rid of the thing that was a problem for us, and it's fair to have an answer to a problem. That's how Magic works. So yeah, Demolition Field is a solid include. Finally, we're running Rogue's Passage. We're not really looking to win with huge overwhelming combat damage by big creatures, but you never know. We're not really looking to win with commander damage, but you never know. Sometimes Rogue's Passage, just like our Whirler Rogue making things unblockable, can really help us. So this is an untapped land that taps for colorless mana, or we can pay 4, tap it, 4 and tap it rather, to make a creature unblockable this turn. Usually we're going to use that on our own creatures, but just like with Whirler Rogue, we can use this politically on an opponent's creatures, or not politically on opponent's creatures. We can trade this unblockability for to an opponent for whatever boon we want to ask of them, so that they can get in with an unblockable attack on one of our other opponents. Or we can watch someone make a big alpha strike attack against someone else and then just make one of their big creatures unblockable so that that defending player dies and we don't have to worry about it. So yeah, Rogue's Passage very strong for us in this deck in those ways. Even though it's not doing as much as some of our other cards are doing for us, still nice to have an extra bit of utility, and the cost of inclusion is so low. It's a land. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new TMNT decks every Thursday through mid-April when Secrets of Strixhaven drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or deck style. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell if you want to be notified when I post my videos. And remember that Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.